High walls of black stone soared into a sky the color of dying embers, forming the unbreakable perimeter of Blackmoor Castle. From a distance, the fortress looked hewn from the very bones of the mountains, its towers casting ominous silhouettes against the setting sun. Narrow windows gleamed like watchful eyes, and guard posts bristled with archers ready to defend their alpha's domain at a moment's notice. Yet for all its cold grandeur, this stronghold also whispered of tradition, pride, and deep-rooted power, a kingdom that had bowed to no one for centuries. Evelyn, revered Luna of Blackmoor, felt the ancient weight of these walls every time she crossed the massive drawbridge. Today was no exception. Clad in a flowing gown of midnight blue that mirrored the swirling clouds overhead, she made her way inside, heart pounding as heavily as the iron portcullis. Though her station demanded poise, her wolf stirred with restless unease, sensing changes in the wind. Something intangible pressed at her senses, a pulse of tension that refused to subside. At her side, a pair of personal guards walked in silent escort, their footsteps echoing across the courtyard's cobblestones. The flicker of torches played across stern faces and battered armor. The hour grew late, and each stride seemed to swallow the hush of day, devouring the last vestiges of lingering warmth from the sunlit sky. The nearing dusk brought with it a chill that curled around Evelyn's ankles. She exhaled slowly, as if releasing her apprehension into the night. But the burden wouldn't leave her so easily. High above the courtyard, flags bearing the emblem of Blackmoor, two wolves entwined beneath a single moon, rippled defiantly in a cool breeze. For as long as Evelyn could remember, she had been at Aldrich's side, wearing these emblems with pride. She was the Luna of this kingdom, the rightful queen to an unyielding alpha who commanded everything and everyone within these walls. Yet of late, her heart carried a bruise that no outward display of loyalty could conceal. She paused on the worn stone steps leading to the great hall. A series of portraits lined the entrance, past alphas and Lunas of Blackmoor, their eyes watchful and stern even in painted form. In each depiction, the Luna stood beside her alpha, often with children gathered at her skirts, proclaiming the success of their lineage. The final portrait remained painfully bare. It showed Evelyn in her early 20s, gazing forward with measured dignity, her long silver blonde hair pinned up in an elegant twist. At her side, Aldrich stood in formal regalia, tall, powerful, the embodiment of a king. Yet there were no heirs to complete the scene. That empty space haunted her every time she passed by. She forced her gaze away. It was a sorrow she had carried for years, the knowledge that in the eyes of many, a Luna's worth was measured by the children she brought into the world. But the moon goddess had withheld that blessing, and Evelyn, despite potions, prayers, and fervent devotion, remained without child. Rumors had begun to swirl like crows around Carrion. She's barren. She's cursed. She's unfit to be our Luna. Taking a stealing breath, she pushed through the heavy doors and entered the great hall. The ceiling soared overhead, buttressed by carved columns depicting wolves locked in eternal combat. Braziers burned bright, fighting off the gloom of the oncoming night. Long banquet tables had been arranged along the sides, set with polished silverware for the feast to come. Normally, Evelyn would take pride in these details, ensuring every aspect of hospitality shone as a reflection of her station. Tonight, her soul felt brittle, as if any gust of misfortune might splinter her composure. A hush spread through the hall as she walked. Servants, dressed in neat uniforms, hurried to lay out platters of roasted meats, bread, and fruit. Nobles and lesser pack leaders stood in clusters, speaking in hushed undertones. Conversations halted at Evelyn's approach. Though most bowed their heads in respect, she sensed the weight of their glances, some curious, some pitying, some condemning. The swirling tension roused her wolf again, a faint growl at the back of her mind. She made her way to the raised dais at the far end, where two high-backed chairs sat, thrones for the Alpha and Luna. The seat was painfully familiar. She had sat there so often beside Aldrich that the cushion bore the slight imprint of her form. As she ascended the steps, she noticed something else. Aldrich was not present. His throne stood empty, the area behind it heavily guarded, but devoid of the man who should have welcomed her. And though she knew he would appear eventually, he rarely missed an opportunity to display control. The emptiness gnawed at her. Duty demanded she remain poised, so she settled herself into her seat. The servants brought a chalice of mulled wine perfumed with cloves and cinnamon, setting it on a small table within arm's reach. Evelyn's fingers curled around the chalice, but she did not drink. The restless whispers throughout the hall rose like a tide of discontent. Over the past months, rumors had spread of tensions with the elders, those ancient guardians of tradition who insisted the pack's future demanded an heir, and soon. She hadn't wanted to believe the rumors, but echoes traveled through servant talk, through the beta's cautious tone, through the persistent hush that followed her wherever she walked. And all suggested the same dire possibility. The elders demanded Aldrich take a second mate if Evelyn could not conceive. As horrifying as that prospect was, a sliver of her dreaded that it might be true. The air in the hall felt stifling now. Abruptly, the heavy doors swung open with a clang. A hush fell. Aldrich entered, flanked by his betas and several elders dressed in ceremonial robes of deep maroon. The gold torque around his neck gleamed under the torchlight, reflecting the resolute lines of his jaw and the faint shadows beneath his dark amber eyes. He radiated authority, tall, broad-shouldered, exuding the natural dominance that had made him the most feared alpha of these lands. Yet a tension lined his face as if an inner battle raged behind those inscrutable eyes. Aldrich strode purposefully to the dais. Without sparing Evelyn a glance, he took his place on the adjacent throne. She felt his wolf's presence, powerful, almost suffocating. For a moment, she tried to catch his gaze, to glean any sign of what might be brewing in his thoughts, but he stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, as though refusing to acknowledge her. An icy current twisted in her stomach. Her pulse throbbed in her throat, and she willed her expression to remain calm. The elders followed closely behind him, forming a semicircle at the foot of the dais, their thick robes swirling around their ankles. Among them was Elder Matthias, an imposing figure known for his unwavering adherence to tradition. He carried a staff topped with the carved image of a howling wolf beneath a moon, symbolizing the authority he wielded on behalf of all elders. The hall quieted until every shifting footstep, every flutter of breath, seemed unnaturally loud. Aldrich's beta, Lucian, stepped forward and rapped a short baton against the floor to signal for silence. The moment felt suspended, a fragile hush that threatened to burst. Then, Elder Matthias's voice rang out, echoing against the stone columns. "Gathered wolves of Blackmoor, we come together this evening at the behest of your alpha to address a matter of utmost importance, the future of this pack. Through centuries of conflict and triumph, we have always trusted in the guidance of the moon goddess and in our traditions that safeguard our survival." Each word settled like a lead weight upon the onlookers. Nobles in fine attire strained forward, as though anticipating a dramatic decree. Warriors in battered leather paused, standing rigid beside the columns. Servants, trembling, peered from the edges of the hall, curious but wary. Evelyn's heart pounded even harder, a distressed tempo she couldn't quell. Elder Matthias shifted his gaze to Aldrich. "Alpha, speak your intent." For a moment, Aldrich said nothing. He seemed to gather himself, shoulders rising with a long, measured inhale. When he finally spoke, his voice rumbled with a restrained power that commanded attention. "We are at a crossroads. Blackmoor's strength lies in its alpha line, an unbroken legacy that has preserved our kingdom's dominance. Yet for all our might, the bloodline stands in peril." A flicker of pain passed across his features. Evelyn knew exactly to what he referred, the vacant cradle that had haunted them for years. She swallowed, feeling the silent condemnation that hung in the air. The elders exchanged glances that carried unspoken meaning. Aldrich continued, "My Luna, Evelyn, has borne the title for 5 years. In that time, we have not been blessed with a child. We have prayed, consulted healers, invoked the moon goddess's mercy, but to no avail." His tone held an edge of desperation buried beneath forced calm. For a second, he looked as though he might turn toward Evelyn. But he didn't. Soft gasps rippled through the crowd. Evelyn gripped the arms of her throne. The mention of her inability to conceive stung like the lash of a whip. Aldrich had rarely spoken of it in public, and now that he did, it felt like the entire kingdom's eyes zeroed in on her failings. Her cheeks burned, yet she kept her posture straight, head held high. She would not show weakness, no matter how her heart constricted. Elder Matthias cleared his throat. Indeed, the line stands in peril, Alpha. And you have summoned us here tonight to declare your next step, have you not? Aldrich's gaze flicked to the far end of the hall. Yes. Then, with a deliberate slowness, he rose to his feet. The metal studs on his boots clicked ominously on the dais. Turning at last, he faced Evelyn. Their eyes met, a collision of unspoken regrets and shadows. A tremor coursed through her, but she refused to avert her gaze. Luna Evelyn, he began, voice echoing in the hush. You have served Blackmoor with unwavering grace. Your loyalty has never been in question, nor your devotion to me. He paused, and something like sorrow flickered through his eyes. But the pack's needs must come before any one wolf, before even an alpha's desire. Her pulse thundered in her ears. All around her, the hall seemed to shrink, the air pressing inward. Servants and nobles gazed in mute fascination. The elders watched with the silence of judges about to deliver a death sentence. Aldrich's next words cut through Evelyn's composure like a blade. In recognition of our unfulfilled duty to produce an heir, he said, I accept the elders' counsel to ensure the survival of Blackmoor's lineage. He took a step closer. I will be taking a second mate. The hall erupted in gasps. Even the torches seemed to sputter, as if in shock. Evelyn's breath caught. It felt like the floor had fallen out from beneath her. Betrayal clawed at her chest, nearly stifling any rational thought. For years, she had sacrificed so much to be the Luna he needed. Sleepless nights of worry, heartbreak over miscarriages that had never even occurred. Yet here, under the glaring scrutiny of an entire court, Aldrich calmly announced he would take another woman to ensure an heir. Struggling to find her voice, she rose shakily from her seat. Her knees threatened to buckle, but she forced strength into them. She had to speak, had to protest, had to say something. Yet her mind screamed with a single question. Did he ever love me at all? Before she could utter a word, Aldrich lifted a hand as though halting her. I do not do this lightly, he said, turning slightly to address the gathered wolves. And I do not seek to shame my Luna. It is a decision born out of necessity, not desire. But the ring of finality in his voice had already done its damage. Noblewomen pressed their palms to their lips in horror or pity, while some of the noblemen frowned. Warriors shifted, exchanging murmurs that reverberated with shock. The elders, for the most part, looked grimly satisfied, as though a plan long in the making had finally borne fruit. Evelyn's nails dug into the arm of her throne, her entire being trembling from the weight of this pronouncement. Elder Matthias nodded, stepping forward. In that case, we, the Council of Elders, will hold a formal ceremony to mark the introduction of your second mate. May the moon goddess see the truth in your heart, Alpha Aldrich, and bless you with the heir Blackmoor so desperately needs. Something inside Evelyn snapped. She took a step forward, ignoring the unraveling in her chest. This is unheard of, she said, voice husky with emotion. A second mate is a betrayal of the mate bond. The pack has always taught that the mate bond is sacred, unbreakable. How dare? Her words caught in her throat when Aldrich turned on her with a stare so full of tension that it crushed her protests. I would not have to do this if circumstances were different, he said, low enough that only she could hear. Then, raising his voice, Evelyn, you are still Luna, but the pack's future demands this course of action. For that, I can offer no apology. Anguish carved lines into her face. She wanted to scream that she had done everything, prayed at the altars, choked down bitter herbs from healers, weathered invasive examinations, endured rumors that gnawed at her sanity. She had bound her heart to his in unshakable loyalty. Now he acted as though she were merely an obstacle. Suddenly, a ripple of murmur spread across the hall. The crowd shifted, turning toward the open doors. There stood Lady Celeste, a refined noblewoman rumored to come from a powerful bloodline capable of producing strong offspring. Her silhouette, framed by torchlight, looked almost ethereal. Long dark hair flowed over an elegant, pearl-studded gown, and a faint, knowing smile curved her lips. She walked in with a gentle sway, eyes lowered demurely, and that single gesture told Evelyn everything she needed to know. This had been carefully orchestrated. Lady Celeste curtsied before Aldrich, ignoring Evelyn altogether. The air thickened with a new tension. Half the onlookers gaped, a few quickly bowed their heads, acknowledging the probable new mate. Evelyn watched, feeling as though her heart was flayed wide open, every doubt and insecurity laid bare for all to see. Aldrich, expression schooled into regal coolness, extended his hand to Celeste. "Rise," he commanded, helping her to stand. Celeste did so with practiced grace, gaze gliding to Evelyn for the briefest moment, a glance filled with quiet victory. Then she turned her full attention to Aldrich, letting her eyes gleam as if enthralled by his presence. A wave of mortification and rage crashed through Evelyn's veins. "No," she wanted to shout. "This cannot happen." But the kingdom's traditions supported Aldrich's decision. If a Luna failed to produce an heir, the alpha had grounds to seek another mate. It was a seldom invoked measure, more legend than practice, but that hardly mattered when the elders themselves were endorsing it. Elder Matthias, raising his staff high, proclaimed, "We present Lady Celeste of House Asterin. Let her be considered for union with our alpha, that Blackmore may once again flourish under a rightful heir." Applause rippled through parts of the crowd, while others watched with either sympathy or silent condemnation. Evelyn struggled to stand tall, to maintain the dignity she had cultivated for so long, yet despair shredded her composure. Her face felt hot, her ears rang with the echo of Matthias's words. Couldn't Aldrich see what he was doing? Their mate bond pulsed painfully around her heart, but she sensed his presence receding, like a door slowly closing on everything they had once shared. A swirl of conflicting emotions blazed in his eyes. Was it guilt, or merely frustration that she had forced him to act? She decided she wouldn't stand there like a wounded lamb. Forcing her shoulders back, she stepped forward until she stood almost between Aldrich and Celeste, drawing the attention of every soul in the hall. "Blackmore deserves an heir," she managed, voice resonant despite the tremor in her body. "But do not think for one moment I will fade away. I am still Luna, chosen by the moon goddess. I will fulfill my duties, and I will not be pushed aside." Her gaze snapped to Celeste, who lifted an eyebrow in faint challenge. "No matter who stands at your side, Aldrich, I will not be erased." An audible gasp rippled among the watchers. Lunas were not known to defy their alphas openly. Aldrich's jaw tightened, his wolf bristling at what might be considered insubordination. But for a few measured heartbeats, he said nothing. Something like raw admiration sparked in his gaze, quickly squashed by the weight of tradition. Finally, he nodded stiffly, turning to the elders. "Ensure preparations are made," he commanded, ignoring Evelyn's quiet fury. "This matter will be formalized soon." Without another word, Aldrich descended the dais, Celeste gliding after him in a swirl of silk. The elders followed in a pack, discussing the ceremonial formalities required to introduce a second mate. The gathered crowd parted, letting them pass like a funeral procession. Evelyn stood alone at the raised throne, the flicker of torches reflecting her isolation. She could almost feel the mate bond strangling her heart, an invisible tether that refused to break, but instead burned like a brand against her soul. As the footsteps retreated, the hush in the hall dissipated into hushed gossip. Tension thickened the air until Evelyn found it hard to breathe. Her fists shook. She felt the sting of tears brimming, threatening to shatter the stoic veneer she had so painstakingly crafted. With one final glance at the throng of watchers, she stepped down from the dais and swept out of the hall. She would not let them see her crumble. The corridor leading to her private chambers felt cavernous, each torch flickering against ancient tapestries and carved wolf effigies. The faint smell of melted wax and old stone filled the air. Her footsteps echoed hollowly, creating a lonely percussion that underscored her solitude. Guards and servants she passed bowed in deference, quickly averting their eyes, likely unsure how to regard a Luna who'd just been so publicly diminished. At last, she reached her chambers, heaving the door shut behind her with more force than necessary. The latch rattled, the reverberation filling the space. Momentarily, she allowed herself the release she had been stifling. Tears broke free, sliding down her cheeks in silent trails. She let them fall, each droplet carrying pieces of her shattered hopes. Could she blame Aldrich entirely? The kingdom needed an heir. She had tried every remedy, prayed at every altar, endured humiliating examinations. Yet no child came. And that was reason enough, apparently, for the elders to corner Aldrich, to ensure the Blackmore line continued, even if it meant trampling her vow as Luna. Perhaps, in some twisted sense, Aldrich was also a victim of fate, compelled to do what was necessary. The thought offered only the slightest comfort, overshadowed by the raw sense of betrayal coursing through her. She sank into a chair by the hearth, the low flames dancing over her stunned features. A polished mirror stood across the room, reflecting the image of a woman with rumpled, silver-blonde hair and eyes reddened by tears. The sight almost startled her. She remembered the younger version of herself, eyes filled with hope, stepping into Blackmore Castle on her wedding day. How different that woman was from the one who shivered in heartbreak before the fire now. When had the cracks started forming? Perhaps the seeds of doubt were always present from the moment she failed to conceive after their union. Yet Aldrich had once lavished her with warmth, had once gazed at her as though she alone lit his world. Could power and expectation have overshadowed all that so swiftly? She forced her breathing to slow, forced her mind to find a foothold in the midst of swirling chaos. She needed a plan. Just because Aldrich intended to take another mate didn't mean she was powerless. She was still Luna, still recognized by the pack as a leader. The elders couldn't simply remove her without cause. If she could rally the support of certain nobles or appeal to the traditions that revered Luna's position, maybe she could keep a measure of influence. Maybe she could ensure that she wouldn't be cast aside like a broken relic. Her thoughts churned, circling a single question: would she remain in Blackmore at all? A part of her, small but insistent, whispered that she should leave, that she had no place in this kingdom that turned its back on her so callously. Yet the idea of forsaking her responsibilities clashed with her sense of duty. If she abandoned the wolves who depended on her kindness, she'd be no better than the elders who saw her as useless if she couldn't fulfill a singular purpose. Her heart ached fiercely at the dilemma. Time slipped by as the fire crackled on. She lost track of how long she sat there, lost in swirling thoughts. Eventually, a quiet knock roused her from her tumult. Wiping her eyes, she mustered as much composure as she could and rose. "Enter," she said softly. The door creaked open to reveal a young maid named Lucilla, eyes downcast and hands clutching a steaming pot of tea. "My Luna," she said with a curtsy. "I brought you this. Thought it might ease your nerves." Evelyn's wolf stirred with gratitude at the maid's concern. "Thank you," she managed, voice tight. "Please, set it down." Lucilla hurried to comply, placing the delicate teapot and cup on a side table. Evelyn watched her carefully, noticing the subtle tremor in the maid's hands. The poor girl was likely as unsettled by the night's events as Evelyn was. "Lucilla," she said softly, "do not fear for me. I'm certain the servants are all whispering about what took place, but I will be fine. We all will." Lucilla bit her lip, hesitating as though unsure whether to speak. Then her voice spilled out in a rush. "It's not just talk, my Luna. The guards say the elders plan to have you overshadowed. That's the word they used. They said you'll remain Luna in name, but Lady Celeste will fill the role in practice." A pang of dread speared through Evelyn's chest. "I see," she whispered, swallowing against the wave of hurt that threatened to consume her again. "Thank you for telling me." The maid offered a shaky nod and scurried away, leaving Evelyn standing in the quiet gloom once more. Overshadowed. The concept was humiliating. To be a Luna only in name, effectively cast into the background while another woman bore Aldrich's heir, thus usurping Evelyn's authority. For a moment, rage replaced her sorrow. She set her jaw. If they believed they could simply overshadow her, they were sorely mistaken. She had not endured years of heartbreak, not poured every ounce of herself into this kingdom, only to be relegated to a powerless figurehead. This was her pack as much as it was Aldrich's. She thought back to her training days. She'd been instructed in swordplay, archery, and grappling, albeit discreetly. Initially, it had been for ceremonial or self-defense purposes. But perhaps those dormant skills might still serve her. She wasn't a helpless ornament. Let them try to overshadow her, she would stand as an obstacle to any who thought to cast her aside. Drawing a resolute breath, she walked over to the small writing desk near the window. Moonlight filtered through the glass, illuminating scattered parchment and a quill pen. She took a seat, lit a narrow taper candle, and began scribbling notes with fierce determination, strategies, names of allies, resources she could leverage. She needed to contact a few of the lesser noble houses that had always held her in high regard. She would need their backing to maintain her standing. Hours slipped by in a frenzy of planning. Evelyn filled page after page with neat lines of script, her mind churning with possibilities. She considered how the elders might respond, how Aldrich might attempt to quell her. She weighed potential alliances with other packs. Not many would side against Aldrich. He was feared for good reason, but perhaps they would side with her if the cause resonated with them. By the time she set her quill down, the candle had melted nearly to the wick, sputtering in a pool of wax. Evelyn rubbed her exhausted eyes. She'd constructed a plan, though it still felt tenuous. The next step would be to speak with certain courtiers privately, to gauge their willingness to support a Luna who refused to be overshadowed. Yet as she gazed at her frantic notes, a hollow ache reminded her that no matter how carefully she plotted, the fundamental heartbreak remained. She might never bear Aldrich's heir. And he had chosen to remedy that with another woman. Even if she preserved her position politically, her personal bond with Aldrich lay in tatters. Still, a faint flicker of defiance sparked in her chest. She would not surrender. Let them see the woman behind the title, a Luna who would fight, not simply fade. If there was any justice in this world of curses and blessings, she would ensure her voice did not remain silent. Night had fully settled by the time Evelyn rose from the desk, leaning against the windowsill to gaze at the moonlit courtyard. Far below, patrols wandered the fortress walls, mere silhouettes in the silver glow. Beyond those walls lay a kingdom of countless wolves, all of whom deserved guidance and protection from a Luna they could trust. She would prove to them that her worth did not hinge solely on bearing a child. As the moonlight kissed her hair, Evelyn closed her eyes and prayed silently to the moon goddess. She prayed not for a child, but for strength, for wisdom, for the courage to endure whatever the coming days might bring. She prayed that if the goddess truly guided fates, perhaps she would not abandon the wolf who had believed in her unwaveringly. In the stillness, a single tear slipped down Evelyn's cheek, reflecting the moon's glow. Far off, a wolf howled, a haunting lament that trembled against the ancient stones. She wasn't sure if it was a call of comfort or of sorrow. Perhaps it was both. At last, she turned, her heart pounding with a renewed sense of purpose. She would not remain idle, waiting for her own story to be written by others. She would carve her own path, Luna of Blackmoor or not. Steeling herself against the hollow echo of Aldrich's words, "I will be taking a second mate," she strode from the window. Tomorrow, she would set her plan in motion. Until then, she resolved not to cry another tear. She had already shed enough to flood the castle moat 10 times over. Gathering her scattered notes, she stowed them away in a locked drawer. The flicker of defiance in her eyes refused to be quenched. When she finally blew out the candle and crawled into the massive bed that she once shared intimately with Aldrich, a fresh wave of loneliness crashed over her. The bed felt too big, too cold, its silken sheets offering no comfort. Memories of nights wrapped in Aldrich's arms threatened to unravel her composure once more, but she clenched her teeth and forced the thoughts away. She would survive. Even if it took every ounce of resolve, she would survive. Lying there in the quiet darkness, Evelyn listened to her own heartbeats. Each pulse seemed an echo of her determination. She replayed the vow in her mind: I will not fade. I will not be a forgotten footnote in Blackmore's history. Then, at last, she let exhaustion claim her, sinking into a restless sleep troubled by dreams of howling wolves and moonlit altars splattered with tears. Dawn arrived all too soon, painting the eastern horizon with pale washes of lavender and peach. Evelyn woke with her jaw clenched, the imprint of sorrow still etched into her brow. She rose, dressed in a subdued gown, and rang for breakfast. Though her appetite was scarce, she forced down a few bites of bread and sipped lightly spiced tea. She would need all her strength for the trials ahead. Word spread quickly that the Luna was up and about. A small cluster of ladies-in-waiting materialized in her chambers, faces anxious with questions they dared not voice. Evelyn, schooling her features into placid calm, gave them instructions for the day's schedule, an audience in the great hall to address minor disputes among the pack, a meeting with the castle steward to settle accounts, and an afternoon appointment with a local herbalist, just in case there remained any chance of improving her fertility. She was not naive enough to think some new herb would solve years of disappointment, but it maintained the facade of diligence. Whispers floated among the ladies about Lady Celeste's presence in the castle, about how she, too, had arrived at dawn, meeting with certain elders. The ladies relayed bits of overheard conversation, painting a picture of Celeste's confident stride as she toured the castle corridors, her hand resting lightly on Aldrich's arm. Evelyn listened impassively, withholding the roiling emotions within her. Let Celeste strut. Evelyn would not be overshadowed. Within the hour, she made her way to the great hall, head held high, determined to carry out her Luna duties as if nothing had changed. But the moment she stepped inside, she caught sight of Celeste speaking with a group of courtiers near the dais. The new arrival had chosen a striking crimson gown, a color that screamed confidence and boldness. Her raven hair cascaded over one shoulder, and a luminous pendant glittered at her throat, an elaborate piece shaped like a wolf's fang, set with rubies. At Evelyn's entrance, Celeste glanced over and smirked, a subtle tilt of the lips, a faint arch of one brow. The courtiers turned, bowed to Evelyn, and parted to let her pass. Evelyn's heart hammered. She felt Celeste's smug gaze follow her, as though evaluating her every move. She raised her chin. She would not engage in petty spats in front of the pack. Instead, she strode to her usual seat near the dais, ignoring the heavy hush that fell as others observed the tension between them. One of the courtiers, a minor lord named Garrick, cleared his throat nervously. "My Luna, we did not expect you so soon. Word is the Alpha might join us later this morning to discuss some pressing matters." A lesser soul might have quailed at Aldrich's absence, suspecting he was with Celeste, finalizing plans for their union. But Evelyn refused to show any sign of fragility. "This hall belongs to Blackmore, and I remain its Luna," she replied. "If the Alpha is delayed, I will see to the pack's needs until he arrives." She beckoned for the first petitioner to step forward, a farmer from the outskirts who had come seeking restitution for livestock lost to rogue wolves. As the farmer spoke, Evelyn forced her mind to focus on the details of the complaint. She questioned him calmly, promising to dispatch a small guard unit to patrol his lands. Her manner was efficient yet empathetic, a trait she had honed over years of dealing with countless pack members. Through it all, she sensed Celeste lingering by the dais, listening to each word. The woman made occasional comments to the nobles around her, sometimes letting out a gentle laugh as though mocking what she observed. Evelyn ground her teeth but refused to look in her direction. She would not give Celeste the satisfaction of reaction. An hour passed in that manner. Evelyn resolved minor disputes, allocated resources to a local village that had endured a harsh winter, and directed messengers to carry out tasks. If anyone noticed how her hands occasionally trembled or how she pressed her lips together to conceal her angst, they said nothing. She was Luna, and the dignity of that title demanded perfection, even when her world teetered on the brink of collapse. At last, the main business concluded, and Evelyn excused herself from the dais. Celeste was still there, idly toying with the ruby pendant. Evelyn could feel the challenge radiating from the other woman's stance, but she lifted her head and offered a curt nod, refusing to be baited. She moved to leave the hall. Then, a voice smooth as velvet stopped her in her tracks. "Luna Evelyn. A moment, if you please." Celeste's tone dripped with politeness, but Evelyn could sense the barbs beneath. Tension coiled in Evelyn's stomach. She turned, pinning Celeste with a measured look. "Yes, my lady?" Celeste stepped closer, and the surrounding courtiers pretended not to watch, though Evelyn sensed the keen interest in their furtive glances. "I simply wish to express my admiration," Celeste said, an insincere smile curving her mouth. "You rule so gracefully, even with all that has happened." Evelyn clasped her hands in front of her to hide any trembling. "I appreciate the sentiment, Lady Celeste. Though I find it strange that one might congratulate me on doing my duty." "True." Celeste's dark lashes swept downward, feigning thoughtfulness. "But being Luna must be especially challenging under the circumstances. The entire pack is quite curious about your next steps." A flash of anger ignited in Evelyn's chest. She would not let this woman, a stranger to Blackmoor, undermine her. "My next steps," she said, voice cutting, involve ensuring that every wolf under this castle's protection receives the care and leadership they deserve. Beyond that, I owe no explanation." Celeste's lips twisted in a mischievous grin. "Of course. But if you ever need assistance, do let me know. After all, we share a devotion to Blackmoor's future." A flush of fury rose in Evelyn's cheeks, but she channeled it into a regal stare. "I will keep that in mind, my lady," she answered curtly, then swept from the hall before the venom in her heart could spill into a confrontation. She could still feel Celeste's gaze boring into her back as though savoring her discomfort. The corridors felt too cramped, the press of ancient stone suffocating. Evelyn knew she needed air, needed space to think. So she made her way through lesser-used hallways until she emerged onto a small balcony overlooking the inner ward. There, she braced her hands against the balustrade, letting the cool morning breeze wash over her face. Below, life in the castle continued. Stable hands led horses to water, cooks hurried across the yard with baskets of produce. Ordinary routine, seemingly untouched by the Luna's personal crisis. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. The sting of Celeste's words lingered, but more than that, the humiliation of having to share her domain with a woman handpicked to replace her in every meaningful way. A measured presence approached behind her. She glanced over her shoulder to see Beta Lucien, tall and stern, standing at a respectful distance. A flicker of relief cut through her tension. Lucien had always been a steadfast ally, though his loyalty to Aldrich sometimes left him torn. "Luna," he said, bowing. "Aldrich has asked me to inform you that preparations are underway for a grand feast tomorrow night, an event to formally present Lady Celeste to the court." She inhaled sharply. The final blow, then. A public unveiling, a celebration of the second mate. "I see," Evelyn replied, forcing composure. "When does he expect me to arrive?" Lucien's gaze flicked with sympathy, though he tried to mask it. "He wishes for you to be present, of course. He stated that it's important for the pack to see their Luna and the future mother of the heir unified." She almost laughed at the absurdity. "Unified," she repeated. Bitterness laced her tone. "Tell Aldrich I will attend. Let us not disappoint the pack's expectations." Lucien nodded, bowing once more before retreating. Left alone on the balcony, Evelyn let her facade slip for just a moment, pressing her forehead against the cold stone. She had until tomorrow night to fortify herself for this humiliating spectacle. The entire kingdom would be watching her, gauging whether she stood strong or crumbled under the reality of being overshadowed. In the distance, the towers of Blackmoor Castle rose grim and silent, sentinel to her agony. Evelyn exhaled, drawing the chill morning air deep into her lungs. One step at a time, she told herself. She would endure the feast, endure the scrutiny, endure Celeste's smug posturing. And when the time was right, she would show them all that a Luna was far more than a broodmare for an heir. She would reclaim her destiny, or forge a new one, no matter what power threatened to stand in her way. The gong's thunderous clang resonated down the corridors of Blackmoor Castle, vibrating along its ancient stone walls and summoning every soul within its fortress gates. Warriors, courtiers, and servants alike moved with purpose, converging on the great hall as if drawn by the gravity of an unseen star. Torchlight flickered across the carved faces of wolves and moons etched into the columns, creating phantom silhouettes that danced along the floor. Tonight was the night everything would change, and the weight of it pressed against Evelyn's chest. She stood just outside the threshold of the great hall, behind the towering oak doors. Her heart pounded so loudly she half expected the entire castle to hear. For days, she had braced herself for this moment, the festive gathering Aldrich had arranged. Though no one had stated it outright, rumor painted a grim picture that the Alpha intended to make a decisive announcement about his future and hers. Exhaling shakily, Evelyn smoothed her trembling fingers over the midnight blue silk of her gown. She wore minimal adornments. A single crescent moon pendant rested at her throat, a stark reminder of the bond she once believed unbreakable. If the moon goddess still watched, perhaps tonight she'd offer a shred of mercy. Summoning what remained of her composure, Evelyn nodded to the guards. They swung open the doors, and she stepped forward into a wave of sound and light. The great hall was packed, far more crowded than usual. Long tables were laden with spiced meats, fresh-baked breads, and fragrant fruit, but few seemed to pay attention to the feast. Their eyes were fixed on the raised dais at the room's far end. A hush rippled through the gathering as Evelyn moved across the polished floor. She felt dozens upon dozens of gazes prick at her skin like needles. Whispers fluttered in her wake, hushed scraps of rumor and pity. Standing at the dais, in full view of all, was Aldrich, her mate, the Alpha King of Blackmoor. Dressed in somber regalia, he looked as unyielding as the fortress walls themselves. At his side clustered a number of elders, each in flowing maroon robes embroidered with arcane symbols. One of them, Elder Matthias, held a staff topped by the carving of a howling wolf under a moon, an emblem of their authority. Near them stood Beta Lucian, gaze flicking anxiously between Evelyn and Aldrich, as though he sensed the oncoming maelstrom. At last, she reached the dais. The crowd's whispers quieted to a low hum. She curtsied, lightly, stiffly, aware that Aldrich did not offer a hand to help her rise, nor any gesture of affection. Her heart tightened. She had hoped, foolishly, for some signal he still cared. But his face was set in an expression she could only call resolute. Elder Matthias struck his staff on the stone floor, commanding silence. "Wolves of Blackmoor," he intoned. "We are gathered to witness an important declaration from our Alpha. May the moon goddess grant him wisdom and clarity." The tension coiled in Evelyn's chest. She forced herself to meet Aldrich's eyes. Once, they had been tender with love for her. Now, they looked shadowed, closed off, as if he'd chosen duty over emotion. He inclined his head to the elders, then spoke, voice echoing through the hall. "My people, I have called you here to address a matter that weighs heavily upon our pack." A pause, as though the next words cost him dearly. "You all know I have reigned as Alpha these many years, and by my side stood Luna Evelyn, faithful, devoted." A faint murmur threaded through the crowd. Several courtiers nodded respectfully at Evelyn, but an undercurrent of tension remained. Even the brazier's flame seemed to twist impatiently, as if the air itself braced for a storm. Aldrich's gaze slid across the hall before settling on Evelyn. "For 5 years, she has shared in my burdens, guided the pack with me, and carried the hopes of our lineage." Yet, he faltered, frown lines deepening across his brow. "Yet we remain without an heir. The line of Blackmoor stands in peril of ending if no child is produced to continue its legacy." As he spoke, Evelyn clenched her hands at her sides, nails biting into her palms. Shame and pain coalesced like a knot in her throat. She had tried so many times, prayers, potions, healers, anything to fulfill what everyone deemed a Luna's paramount duty. But the moon goddess had not blessed her with a child. And so, Aldrich continued, his voice tightening, the elders have insisted on a solution. One that ensures Blackmore's future is secured. After much struggle, I have chosen to heed their counsel. Elder Matthias stepped forward, staff scraping the floor. Alpha, speak your decision so that all may bear witness. Aldrich's shoulders stiffened. For a moment, Evelyn imagined he might relent, might see her standing there, desperate to remain at his side and choose a kinder path. But then his jaw clenched. Luna Evelyn, he said, turning to her, I honor your devotion and your sacrifice. But the pack's needs must surpass those of any single wolf. I must provide an heir. Her heart thundered. Though she had prepared for this, it still struck her like a physical blow. Bile rose in her throat. This was it. The moment everything she knew crumbled. His next words fell like hammer blows. I hereby release you from our mate bond. You will no longer bear the title of Luna, nor the duties that accompany it. Blackmore shall seek another mother for its future alpha. A collective gasp rippled among the crowd. Some looked aghast, others pitying, and a few appeared grimly satisfied. Evelyn's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. The mate bond that connected her soul to his suddenly felt like it was tangling, twisting, as though an invisible thread pulled taut. But, she choked out, voice cracking, the mate bond is sacred. It was decreed by the moon goddess herself. Aldrich bowed his head, expression unreadable. Forgive me, Evelyn. Duty compels me. I cannot allow sentiment to endanger the pack. I must, he paused, swallowing hard. I must reject you. Her wolf roared inside her mind, denial flooding her senses. The mate bond, so ingrained in her spirit, now splintered under Aldrich's words. A searing pain shot through her chest, radiating outward to the tips of her fingers. With a strangled cry, she stumbled, knees buckling. A wave of dizziness crashed over her, the world tilting. She clutched at her collarbone, exactly where Aldrich's mark used to glow faintly whenever they touched. That warmth had vanished, replaced by a cold ache that cut deeper than any blade. All around her, the hall erupted in commotion. Voices clashed in a blur, some condemning Aldrich's choice, others proclaiming it necessary for the pack's survival. A few courtiers rushed forward as Evelyn sank to the floor, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. The physical torment of a snapping mate bond, like claws tearing at her soul, buckled her resolve. She had never felt so helpless, so broken. Aldrich remained standing, fists tight at his sides. Pain flickered across his face as if he, too, suffered from the bond's rupture. Yet he did not move to help her. Duty, apparently, outweighed every shred of love they had once shared. Elder Matthias's voice boomed over the uproar. Order. The Alpha has spoken. The Council endorses this course of action. A second mate shall be introduced to ensure the continuity of Blackmore's lineage. At that, a guarded door on the opposite end of the hall opened. Lady Celeste, a noblewoman rumored to hail from an influential line known for strong offspring, emerged. Her raven hair fell in glossy waves around her shoulders, a confident smile touching her lips. She glided forward with self-assured grace. Several in the crowd muttered in awe or distaste. Like it or not, Celeste was poised to step into Evelyn's place. Evelyn squeezed her eyes shut, reeling from shock and physical agony. She tasted copper. She must have bitten her lip. Had it truly come to this? Would Aldrich publicly enthrone another as Luna, dismissing everything Evelyn had sacrificed? Before Celeste could address the crowd, a thunderous crash reverberated through the hall. The massive oak doors, which had shut behind Evelyn earlier, now slammed open with bone-jarring force. A gust of night air whooshed in, snuffing out several torches. The entire congregation whirled in startled unison. A figure stood silhouetted against the torchlight from the corridor, tall and commanding. Slowly, he stepped forward, each footfall echoing against the polished floor. He wore a cloak of silver gray, its hem brushing the ground. Beneath the hood, a pair of pale, luminous eyes glinted with uncanny intensity, Alpha Caden of Silver Haven. A hush fell, overshadowing even the swirl of heartbreak that clung to Evelyn. Most recognized the name Silver Haven only through rumors, a far-flung territory steeped in mystic tradition, rarely venturing into the affairs of other packs. Yet here he was, brazen enough to interrupt a formal gathering in one of the most fortified castles in the land. Elder Matthias's face twisted in anger and alarm. Who dares enter unannounced? Guards, restrain him. But the castle guards, uncertain, merely hovered. Something about Caden's presence demanded caution. As he approached, he cast his hood back, revealing hair as dark as midnight and eyes the color of starlight. An almost tangible aura accompanied him, a subtle crackle of power in the air. He ignored Matthias's outburst, gaze sweeping past Lady Celeste, past Aldrich's thunderstruck expression, and settling squarely on Evelyn. She was still on her knees, struggling to rise despite the searing pain of the broken bond. A sharp concern flickered across Caden's features. "Evelyn," he said softly, as if testing her name on his tongue. In that single word, she sensed empathy, even sorrow. He then let his stare drift to Aldrich, a spark of challenge igniting in his silver eyes. Aldrich bared his teeth. "Alpha Caden," he ground out, voice tight with anger. "You dare trespass in my domain?" Caden gave no formal bow. "I come with purpose, not idle curiosity." Lady Celeste took a step back, uncertain how to respond to the tension. The elders looked ready to call the guards on Caden, but he remained fearlessly composed. Without waiting for an invitation, he advanced another stride, scanning the dais with open disdain. "I heard rumor of an event tonight," Caden said, "one that offended the moon goddess's natural order." Elder Matthias struck his staff once more. "Enough of this. How dare you? How dare I?" Caden's tone sliced through the elder's protest like a blade. He turned to the assemblage, voice projecting. "I hear Aldrich has renounced his mate bond. In front of all of you, no less. And for what reason? A need for an heir." His lips curved in a mirthless smile. "Mates are fated by the goddess, not by mortal convenience." Evelyn, though reeling, managed to push herself upright. One hand braced against the stone floor, she breathed in shallow gasps. The mate bond's severing still racked her body with waves of agony. She wasn't sure whether to be alarmed or strangely grateful for Caden's intrusion. Everything was happening too fast. Aldrich descended from the dais, every muscle tense. "She cannot give me an heir. The elders agree our line is at risk. The bond was severed to protect Blackmoor. And you, Silver Haven or no, have no place here." Caden's silver eyes narrowed. "If that bond was truly blessed by the goddess, you would not find it so simple to sever. It seems you have spat in the face of fate itself." Elder Matthias bristled. "You speak as though you know the goddess's design better than we. She does not make mistakes. Evelyn was Aldrich's mate, none can dispute that." At the mention of her name, Evelyn forced herself to stand, her legs shaky. She swallowed against the pain, turning uncertain eyes toward Caden. Something about him was different. Where Aldrich exuded dominance like a hammer, Caden's power felt more like a silent tide, surging beneath the surface. And those eyes, gods, they seemed to pierce her soul. "Evelyn," he said again, voice gentling. "You look like you're in anguish. Let me help." She almost laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Help?" She hardly knew this man. Yet every breath felt like shards of glass scraping her lungs, thanks to the sundered bond. Across the hall, Aldrich scowled, as if torn between jealousy and the stoic mask of an alpha. A short silence stretched before Caden spoke again. "Aldrich, you claim you're free of this mate bond for the sake of an heir. Then I say Evelyn is free as well, free to choose her fate." Aldrich's face twitched. "And what do you mean by that?" Caden exhaled slowly, as if mastering some inner tumult. "I mean she was never yours to reject in the first place." A ripple of shock raced through the hall. Even Lady Celeste looked taken aback, her confident poise rattled. The crowd erupted in hushed exclamations. "What nonsense is this? He's challenging the goddess's will. Has the man gone mad?" Evelyn's head swam. She stared at Caden in disbelief. How can you claim such a thing? Aldrich and I were mated for 5 years. We felt the bond. We lived by it. An unexpected warmth softened Caden's gaze as he regarded her. Did you, though? Or did you live under a bond that was built on mortal misunderstandings? The goddess doesn't err, but sometimes wolves do. Elder Matthias practically shook with outrage. Blasphemy! If you question the goddess's choice, you question the entire basis of our society. Caden held his ground. I question only the assumption that you understood her plan. There are tales of mistaken bonds rare, but not impossible. If Aldrich can so easily renounce Evelyn, might that not be a sign something was amiss all along? A low growl rumbled in Aldrich's throat. Mind yourself, Silverhaven Alpha. You're close to crossing a line from which there's no return. Despite the menace in Aldrich's voice, Caden seemed eerily calm. He turned back to Evelyn, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. I'm not here to cause more pain, Evelyn. I felt a disturbance, an echo of heartbreak that led me here. My seers warned me an injustice was happening in Blackmore. When I learned you were being rejected, I suspected why. Why? Evelyn's voice was a tremulous whisper. She hated how weak she sounded, but the mate bond's agony radiated through every fiber of her being. Caden's gaze flickered with sympathy. Because the goddess never intended you for him. A collective gasp rippled. Aldrich lunged, fists clenched, but Beta Lucian and a pair of warriors rushed to hold him back. The tension in the hall soared to a fever pitch. Elders cried out in protest. Lady Celeste reeled, her carefully crafted plans for the evening in disarray. Release me. Aldrich roared, face contorted with fury. This is an invasion. He insults our entire pack's sovereignty. Caden merely watched, stony and unyielding. You speak of sovereignty while trampling the sanctity of the mate bond. Look at her, he said, gesturing to Evelyn. She's on the brink of collapse. You cast her aside like a garment that no longer suits you. If you truly believed the goddess joined your souls, would you be so quick to break it? Aldrich struggled against his men's restraining arms, every muscle taut. She cannot bear an heir. The line is in jeopardy. I have the right to secure a future for Blackmore. By rejecting your mate? Caden's voice echoed in quiet condemnation. If that is your priority, then so be it. But do not spout about destiny when you're the one discarding the goddess's so-called choice. Perhaps the goddess's real choice was withheld until now. Until the illusion of your bond shattered under your own arrogance. Evelyn's vision swam. She pressed a shaky hand to her temple, the dizzy swirl of heartbreak, pain, and confusion nearly overwhelming. She hardly recognized Aldrich in this moment, the merciless lines of his face, the scorn in his voice for the mate who once curled beside him every night. Meanwhile, Caden's presence pulled at her in an unfamiliar way, akin to a half-formed melody that coaxed her battered wolf from despair. Elder Matthias slammed his staff. This is madness. The idea of a mistaken bond is a fable, a bedtime story for pups. You, Alpha Caden, have no right to sow discord in our hall. Caden met Matthias's furious stare. Whether it's a fable or not, I sense that Evelyn's bond to Aldrich was never complete. If it were, he wouldn't be able to do this to her without suffering the same torment. And that begs the question, if it wasn't complete, was it ever genuine? Evelyn closed her eyes, attempting to gather her racing thoughts. The mate bond, as she once understood it, was an unbreakable vow sealed by the goddess. Yet the savage ache coursing through her told a cruel story. The bond was indeed breaking. If it had been wholly ordained by the goddess, would it snap so violently under Aldrich's command? She forced herself to speak, voice quivering. Alpha Caden, what is it you want? Why come here now? Softening his tone, he regarded her with compassion. Because I couldn't stand by while an innocent was cast aside over false pretenses. It's rumored you stand alone, your spirit crushed. I offer you an alternative. Come to Silverhaven, see if your true destiny lies elsewhere. If it does not, if you truly belong here, then I'll leave. A fresh wave of murmurs rippled. The onlookers seemed torn between horror and fascination. Aldrich's face paled with rage, but for a moment, he made no move. The elders huddled, uncertain how to proceed in the face of such an unprecedented claim. And if she refuses you? Aldrich asked at last, voice strangled with barely controlled wrath. Caden spread his hands. Then I'll depart. But if she chooses me, it will confirm what I suspect, that the goddess had different plans all along. Aldrich let out a bitter laugh. You speak as though she owes you an audience. She is my mate, was my mate for 5 years. I alone hold. You alone have severed the bond, Caden cut in, his composure only thinly veiling the tension beneath. In doing so, you forfeit your right to call her yours. Evelyn bit her lip, struggling not to collapse under the pressure of too many revelations. The entire hall quivered with suspense, eyes darting between Alpha Aldrich, the outraged, and Alpha Caden, the interloper. She still felt the echo of that bond's tear, as if shards of glass tore at her spirit. But Caden's words carried a kernel of possibility. Could it be that she was never truly meant to suffer this heartbreak? Elder Matthias tried to regain control. We cannot allow you to steal away our former Luna. The repercussions. She's no prisoner, Caden snapped, eyes flashing. Unless Blackmore claims it enslaves its Lunas. Matthias bristled, but Aldrich waved him aside, stepping forward. The guards who held him parted reluctantly. He advanced on Caden until they stood mere feet apart, two alphas locked in a silent duel of wills. Every muscle in Evelyn's body tensed as she sensed the power radiating from them both. You come here, disrupt my court, disgrace me in front of my pack. Aldrich's voice trembled with barely contained violence. All for some twisted notion that the goddess wanted you in my place? Caden didn't flinch. I come here for Evelyn, not to stoke your pride. You made your choice, Aldrich. If you truly believe she's worthless to you, then relinquish her to a life she can choose for herself. The crowd fell silent again, enthralled by the confrontation. The torches crackled. The braziers hissed. Evelyn could only stare, her heart pounding, as Aldrich wrestled with the truth in Caden's statement. She could see the conflicting emotions warring behind Aldrich's dark amber eyes, fury, sorrow, resentment, regret. He had, indeed, just cast her away. Could he now claim the right to keep her from going with another alpha? At length, Aldrich spoke, voice harsh. Fine. If Evelyn wishes to leave, let her. But do not think I endorse your outlandish claim of a mistaken bond. She's only free to go because I set her aside. That's all. A stinging wave of humiliation washed over her. I set her aside. The words confirmed that, in his mind, she was property he'd simply discarded. Then again, he had truly turned her into a cast-off object in the public eye, dethroning her as Luna. The heartbreak of that reality kept her throat raw. Caden exhaled slowly. Then we agree. Evelyn, the choice is yours. He turned to face her fully. Their gazes locked. She'd never met a wolf with eyes that pale, that intense, as though channeling the moon's luminescence itself. Softly, gently, he offered her a hand. I know you're hurting. The bond's shattering has wounded you deeply. I can't undo that pain, but if you come to Silverhaven, I promise you will not be forced into anything. If there's no truth to the sense I have, I'll ensure you return safely. Her knees threatened to give out again. It was too much. Less than an hour ago, she was still Luna Evelyn, albeit a battered, uncertain one. Now, stripped of her position, her heart in tatters, she was confronted by an alpha who insisted she'd never truly belonged to Aldrich in the first place. Her wolf whimpered, the mate bond's phantom ache resonating through her. Slowly, she managed to gather enough breath to speak. I don't know. I can't. Caden's voice softened further. You don't have to decide right now. But consider the alternative. Will you remain here, overshadowed by this new mate Aldrich seeks to enthrone? Would that not crush your spirit more than it already is? Lady Celeste, who had hovered at the fringes of the dais, stepped forward in a rustle of silk. Alpha Aldrich, do not let this intruder manipulate the situation. You owe it to the pact to remain strong. Evelyn is. Aldrich cut her off with an upraised hand, gaze never leaving Evelyn. Something pained flickered across his face. Perhaps regret. Perhaps a final farewell. I made my choice, he said quietly. The pact's future demanded it, no matter how it looks to outsiders. His eyes strayed to Caden. Take her, if that's what she wants. Evelyn swallowed, tears burning her eyes. Did he feel no love left for her at all, to say those words so easily? Or had he convinced himself that her childlessness was an unforgivable failure? The roiling pain of the broken bond told her that some part of him had cared once. But that part was crushed under duty and pride. Her gaze drifted between Aldrich and Caden. She felt the seething tension in the hall, the hush of wolves who had never witnessed such a spectacle. Could she truly remain in Blackmoor, where her mate had just publicly renounced her? Where Lady Celeste might soon preside as new Luna? The thought made her stomach twist. Caden's outstretched hand remained steady, unwavering, an unexpected symbol of possibility. Trust was not something she could summon easily at this moment, yet the alternative was a slow, humiliating fade into oblivion. She took a shaky breath. Alpha Caden. I need time. Time to heal, to think. He nodded, relief and understanding in his eyes. Then I will stay as a guest, if Aldrich permits, until you are ready to speak. If you command me to leave at any point, I will. Aldrich's lip curled, but he swallowed a retort. Stay, if you must. The night is already ruined, but do not test my patience. Elder Matthias looked apoplectic, staff shaking. This entire fiasco breaks every tradition. Aldrich silenced him with a glare. You demanded an heir, Elder. You orchestrated this debacle. Now we must deal with the consequences. He turned away, shoulders rigid, refusing to meet Evelyn's eyes again. Lady Celeste hurried after him, confusion etched on her face. A swirling tension lingered, the rest of the hall unsure how to proceed. Slowly, conversation resumed, in hushed, agitated tones. The grand feast lay forgotten. Servants hovered, not knowing whether to continue serving or make themselves scarce. Beta Lucian, looking torn, approached Evelyn, but she shook her head, signaling she wanted no fuss. She was exhausted, body and soul battered by heartbreak. Yet a thin sliver of something hope? Curiosity tingled in her mind at Caden's unexpected arrival. Could there truly be a second bond waiting for her? Or was that just a different brand of cruelty? Do you want me to escort you to your chambers? Caden asked quietly, stepping closer. He kept a respectful distance, as if aware his presence might jar her raw emotions. Or shall I remain here? A quake rattled through Evelyn's spine as she fought to keep tears at bay. I can manage, she murmured. Then, as an afterthought, thank you. He offered a faint nod, silver eyes tempered by sympathy. Call on me if you need anything. She inclined her head, too drained for more words. With feet that felt like lead, Evelyn turned and left the great hall. The crowd parted in uneasy silence, letting her pass. Whispers followed her, but she barely heard them. Her arms wrapped around her middle as if to hold herself together. Each step hammered home the brutal reality. She was no longer Luna, no longer Aldrich's beloved mate. The bond's violent rift left her body trembling. Memories assailed her, quiet dawns spent in Aldrich's arms, late-night strategy meetings about the pack's well-being, stolen moments of intimacy that once made her heart soar. All undone with a few curt sentences and the entrance of another man claiming she was never Aldrich's to begin with. She struggled not to sob as she reached her private chambers. The door closed behind her, and she collapsed against it, tears erupting at last. The emptiness inside threatened to swallow her whole. Still, in the midst of that aching void, there flickered a new puzzle piece. If Aldrich had truly been her fated mate, how could he cast her aside so thoroughly? And if the bond was severing so brutally, did that mean, in some twisted sense, that it was never the goddess's will? It was too much to process. Exhausted and racked by grief, Evelyn let her tears fall in the solitude of her room, away from prying eyes. No matter how she tried to rationalize it, the heartbreak remained a fresh wound, bleeding and raw. She didn't know whether to blame Aldrich, the elders, or the goddess herself. Or maybe the blame was hers for not bearing a child. Eventually, tears gave way to hollow numbness. Through a blur, she moved to the fireplace, lighting a small flame to push back the gloom. Shadows danced across the walls, mocking her. She sank onto a nearby chair, mind looping through fragments of the night's events. Aldrich's public rejection. The splintering bond that felt like her soul was being torn. Celeste's poised entrance, expecting to replace Evelyn. And then, the dramatic arrival of Alpha Caden, silver-eyed and fearless, declaring she was never Aldrich's to reject. Over and over, the scene replayed. Part of her wanted to label Caden a liar, a manipulator preying on her vulnerability. But something in his demeanor, in the concern he showed for her immediate well-being, made her pause. What if he truly believed it? What if his conviction was not deception, but a reflection of a deeper truth? Over and over, the scene replayed. Part of her wanted to label Caden a liar, a manipulator preying on her vulnerability. But something in his demeanor, in the concern he showed for her immediate well-being, made her pause. What if he truly believed it? What Aishi stifled a shiver. If that deeper truth pointed to a second mate bond, if the goddess had, for some unknown reason, allowed her to be bound to Aldrich first, what did it mean for her future? She choked on a bitter laugh. The thought that she might have another chance at a bond felt inconceivable, especially while the wounds of the first still bled. Somewhere outside, the castle staff busied themselves cleaning up the fiasco of a feast that ended in chaos. She heard footsteps and muffled voices in the corridor, no doubt gossiping about the shocking events. Word would spread quickly through Blackmoor and beyond. She dreaded the next sunrise, when the full weight of social backlash would descend on her. Would they see her as a jilted mate, cast aside for her failures? Or as a potential pawn between two powerful alphas? Drawing a heavy blanket around her shoulders, she curled up in the chair. Sleep felt distant, overshadowed by a swirl of conflicting emotions. The only comfort she could cling to was the knowledge that, for better or worse, the worst had already happened. Aldrich had shattered their bond. She had survived that terrifying, excruciating moment. Perhaps she could survive the rest. Her gaze drifted to the faint glow of moonlight through the window. Even in the darkest times, the moon shone, distant but steadfast. A memory fluttered up, Aldrich once telling her that the moon goddess had chosen them for each other. She had believed it wholeheartedly. Now, that memory felt like a cruel joke. Yet something in her heart flickered as she pictured Caden's resolute stance, the sincerity in his voice when he said, "If you truly find no truth in me, I'll leave." Could it be that he was offering her the one thing Aldrich never had, freedom to choose? She inhaled shakily, forcing her eyes shut. The world offered no easy answers. In the morning, she'd have to speak to Caden again, try to glean some sense of what drove him to break into Aldrich's fortress. She'd have to gather what tattered dignity she still possessed and face a castle full of wolves either scornful or pitying. But for now, she let the weight of her exhaustion pull her under. As she hovered on the edge of slumber, the final echo of Aldrich's rejection pulsed like a bruise in her chest. Yet, beneath that bruise, faint as a whispered breath, she sensed another presence, like a candle's glow pushing at the darkness. She didn't know if it was real or a figment of her shattered psyche. All she could do was cling to the faint hope that, if the goddess still watched, maybe she had not condemned Evelyn to endless suffering after all. She drifted off to a restless sleep, one that offered no true comfort. Even so, the seeds of a new path, uncertain, dangerous, and possibly liberating, had been planted. Tomorrow's dawn would find Evelyn in a world irrevocably changed, standing at the crossroads of heartbreak and an inexplicable second chance. Morning light crept into Evelyn's chambers like an uninvited guest, spilling through the tall windows to illuminate every shadow and secret. She stirred from restless dreams, heavy-lidded and groggy. For a moment, she forgot the events of the previous night, forgot Aldrich's public rejection, forgot Alpha Caden's stunning arrival, forgot the searing pain that tore her bond to shreds. But reality returned with a jolt. Every breath ached as though her chest were wrapped in iron bands. Her memories caught up in a rush, Aldrich's harsh announcement, the horrified onlookers, and Caden declaring Evelyn was never Aldrich's to reject. Even recalling it made her stomach twist with a nauseating mix of humiliation and anger. She shifted in bed, feeling the crisp linen catch against her skin. And then she felt it, a faint tingle deep beneath her collarbone, where her old mate mark used to glow whenever Aldrich was near. Last night, in the chaos of heartbreak, the mark had gone cold, leaving her with the agonizing sensation of an empty socket in her soul. Now, something new flickered there, like a faint spark. Shock fluttered through her, and she pushed back the covers to stand before the tall mirror propped against the opposite wall. Her reflection looked worn, eyes red-rimmed from tears, hair in disarray. She tentatively pulled the neckline of her nightgown aside, exposing the smooth skin where Aldrich's wolf sigil used to rest. The outline of that old mark had already faded to the point of near invisibility, as if time had accelerated its erosion. She traced trembling fingers over the spot, half expecting to feel pain. Instead, a soft warmth pulsed from within, subtle but undeniable. A knock at the door jolted her, nearly causing her to drop the gown's neckline. She hastily straightened, turning away from the mirror. "Yes, my Luna," came Beta Lucian's voice. Then he stammered a correction. "Evelyn. May I come in?" She crossed the room, unlatched the door, and opened it a fraction. Lucian stood in the hallway, his face lined with an anxious concern that seemed to age him beyond his years. A guard hovered behind him, presumably to keep away the curious or the malicious. He nodded respectfully. "I wanted to check on you. And to inform you that the castle is in disarray. The elders are meeting soon. They've demanded your presence." Her heart lurched. She was no longer Luna. Did she still owe the elders any deference at all? "Demanded," she echoed, bitterness tainting her tone. Lucian's mouth tightened. "They insist. Many are whispering about last night's events, about Caden's arrival, the possibility of a second mate bond. They see it as a threat or blasphemy." Of course they did. Evelyn's insides tensed. The faint flicker at her collarbone pulsed again, as if to remind her exactly why the kingdom might be in uproar. A second mate bond was unheard of. Even second-chance mates, granted only after one partner died, occurred rarely and typically over time. Yet here she stood, physically healthy, with her original bond forcibly severed and a new one possibly forming. She cleared her throat, stepping back. "I'll get dressed and meet them." "Thank you, Lucian." He nodded, eyes darting to the fresh bruise of sorrow under her gaze. "Are you all right?" She couldn't manage more than a hollow laugh. "I'm alive. That's something." He withdrew, leaving her to prepare for what was sure to be yet another tumultuous confrontation. She motioned for her lady's maid, Lucilla, to enter, but paused when she saw how the girl trembled, eyes darting anxiously around the room. "Lucilla," Evelyn said gently, "you've done nothing wrong. Come." The maid exhaled shakily and stepped forward. My lady, how can I serve?" Evelyn heard the unspoken question. "Are you still our Luna? After all that happened, should I call you something else?" But she let it go. There was enough confusion in the castle without sorting out titles. "Help me dress," Evelyn said softly. And she hesitated, inhaling a shaky breath. "Bring something modest but strong. Something that reminds them I won't be cowed." An hour later, she left her chambers wearing a dark forest green gown with understated embroidery, nothing as regal as her former Luna attire, but dignified in its own right. Her hair was twisted into a low chignon at the nape of her neck, secured by a silver pin shaped like a crescent moon. Part of her wondered if wearing that symbol was an affront to the goddess after all that had transpired. But a stubborn spark in her insisted on not letting go of every shred of her identity. She moved through the corridors with Lucian at her side. Guards bowed, servants curtsied, but each greeting carried an undercurrent of uncertainty. The rumor mill had churned all night. Some believed Evelyn's new, unthinkable bond was the goddess's punishment for Aldrich's disrespect. Others claimed it was a trick, a hoax perpetuated by Caden to destabilize Blackmore. His conviction was not deception, but a reflection of a deeper truth. They arrived at a large meeting chamber where the elders typically convened to advise Aldrich or hold internal councils. Today, the heavy wooden door stood ajar, and from within came the low rumble of heated debate. Evelyn hesitated. She could sense Caden's presence, a subtle pull that set her nerves on edge. Gathering her courage, she stepped inside. The chamber was filled with a semicircle of elders, each robed in solemn hues. On one side of the room, Aldrich leaned against a wide oak table, jaw clenched. Lady Celeste lingered behind him, lips pursed. On the other side, near a tall, arched window, stood Alpha Caden, his cloak of silver gray unfastened now to reveal a lean but sturdy frame. His posture was calm, but his eyes flared with restless energy when they lit upon Evelyn. "Evelyn," Elder Matthias said, voice clipped. "We have called you here to clarify certain developments." Aldrich remained silent, but the tension in his posture spoke volumes. Evelyn summoned the last vestiges of composure and gave a measured bow to the elders. "Then I'm here to speak, though I'm no longer Luna." "That is precisely the issue," said another elder, a woman named Rhodessa. She swept a hand toward Caden. "This Alpha from Silverhaven claims a bond is forming between you two. Is that correct?" Evelyn's cheeks burned as every gaze zeroed in on her. She stiffened, refusing to betray weakness. I don't know. Something strange is happening. My old mark is fading, and there's this new warmth in its place. It's faint, but I can't deny it." She cast a quick glance at Caden, who watched her with quiet intensity. "It feels unnatural. Wrong, even." Caden's voice broken, gentler than she expected. "Perhaps it only feels wrong because you've never heard of a second mate bond. Yet the goddess works in ways beyond our understanding." Murmurs rippled among the elders. Matthias's knuckles went white around his staff. "We are aware second chance mates exist when one partner dies. But this two living alphas vying for the same wolf, this is unprecedented. Blasphemous." A frustrated breath escaped Caden. Perhaps if Aldrich had not renounced her so publicly. Aldrich's eyes flashed. "You question my motives again?" Evelyn felt the tension skyrocket. She held up her hand. "Enough. There's no sense in circling the same argument. I did not choose this situation. I'm hurt and confused. All I want is clarity." Rhodessa's gaze softened slightly. "Child, we understand the pain you must be in." She shot Aldrich a pointed look, as if quietly condemning his haste. "But if you succumb to this new bond, if you claim a second mate while the first still lives, where does that leave our laws? Our traditions? The goddess's decrees?" Evelyn swallowed. "I'm not sure. I haven't consented to anything. But I can't stop whatever is happening. My body doesn't obey me in this." Caden stepped forward, respectful but firm. "Then blame me if you must. I refuse to let her remain in agony while the kingdom scorns her for something that may well be divine intervention." Elder Matthias flared his nostrils. "Divine? More like demonic. If the goddess wanted Evelyn to be with you, she'd have never bound her to Aldrich in the first place." Caden's jaw tightened. Could it not be that something or someone tampered with the initial bond? That the goddess's true will only emerges now? A collective hush settled. Evelyn clenched her fists. The possibility had haunted her overnight. Was her union with Aldrich a false bond orchestrated by some hidden plot, power-hungry elders, or a magical interference? No one had any answers. At last, Aldrich spoke. "Regardless of the cause, Evelyn remains bound to me by the memory of our bond. My wolf rebels at the thought of losing her entirely. I rejected her, yes, but that does not mean she was never mine. That's the difference between us, Caden. You barge in, claiming some ephemeral right to her, but you don't feel the weight of the years we shared." A pang of sorrow tugged at Evelyn. Aldrich's words dripped with regret and possessiveness, a toxic brew. She remembered fleeting joys, his smile, his warmth, and the heartbreak cut deeper. But she also recalled how easily he'd let her go, citing duty over love. "Alpha Aldrich," she said, voice low, "if you truly valued me, why reject me in the first place? Why not fight for me, or stand against the elders? You didn't even consider what I wanted." He flinched, guilt flickering across his face. "I had no choice." Caden snorted softly. "There's always a choice." Lady Celeste bristled behind Aldrich, stepping closer. She couldn't conceive. "The pack needs an heir. Aldrich's choice was forced upon him by the very nature of leadership. He's not to blame for the goddess's silence. That triggered something fierce in Evelyn's chest. She glared at Celeste. The goddess's silence? Must you rehash my so-called failure as if I had any say in my fertility? Celeste held up her chin, though color rose in her cheeks. I mean no disrespect, but facts are facts. Caden intervened before tempers could flare further. The real fact is this: Evelyn's mark is changing. If the goddess truly rejects this new bond, it would wither and die, would it not? Matthias's staff scraped the floor. We can't be certain. No record exists of such an event. That's because it's never happened, Lucien put in quietly. At least not in our documented history. Evelyn exhaled shakily, trying to quell the swirl of chaos. So what does the council suggest I do? Because every second I feel this shift under my skin. As though I'm being claimed against my will. Caden's gaze flicked to her. I would never force a bond. If the goddess has set this path, then it will manifest naturally. If you resist and it fades, so be it. I won't stand in your way. A hush. The sincerity in his voice chipped away at her walls. She recalled the night before, his promise that if she found nothing real between them, he'd depart. She was torn. Part of her yearned to trust him, to see if genuine comfort lay in that silver gaze. But fear of heartbreak and guilt about Aldrich tangled in her chest. Elder Rodessa sighed, sounding weary. Then perhaps we allow time. If Evelyn's mark transforms fully to Caden's, that indicates a new bond is indeed forming, ordained by the goddess. If it fades instead, well, she trailed off, letting the implication hang. Matthias scowled. And if it does transform, does that make Aldrich's prior bond an abomination? The implications for our laws would be seismic. Caden's voice hardened. Your laws are already in question, Elder. You coerced Aldrich to discard his mate like a defective trinket. Don't speak of abominations when you thrash the goddess's gift for your own ends. Aldrich stiffened, conflict ravaging his features. Enough. I will not be lectured on my own domain. If this bond truly forms, I'll handle the consequences. But let it be known, I will not stand aside and watch Evelyn slip away without a fight. Evelyn's heart thudded as she realized how literal that statement might be. Were they heading toward an alpha duel, Caden versus Aldrich? Bloodshed just to determine which male wolf deserved her? The thought revolted her. No, she spoke firmly. I won't let the two of you tear each other apart as if I'm some prize. I refuse to be used or possessed. I want control over my own life. The quaver in her voice gave way to determination. If this new bond is real, and I accept it, then it'll be on my terms. Not yours. Caden inclined his head respectfully. Aldrich stared, looking wounded. Celeste pressed a disapproving frown, obviously displeased that Evelyn still had a say. The elders exchanged sharp glances, as though uncertain how to proceed without a clear, centuries-old precedent. Finally, Elder Matthias let out a strained breath. So be it. We will watch and wait. But I warn you, Evelyn, if the goddess truly has cast Aldrich's bond aside in favor of a second union, it will shake the kingdom to its core. The other pacts will question our stability. Tensions could rise to conflict. Evelyn's throat tightened. She realized that her personal anguish was no longer just her burden. Blackmore's entire political landscape teetered on the edge of chaos. A swirl of guilt mingled with the flicker at her collarbone. Was she risking war simply by allowing herself to exist in this bizarre, liminal state? She turned, unable to bear the tension, and stepped toward the door. Lucien followed, looking concerned. At the threshold, she glanced back. Aldrich stared at her, sorrow overshadowed by grim stubbornness. Caden's expression brimmed with quiet resolve. Lady Celeste, arms crossed, wore a mask of hostility. The elders looked torn between exasperation and fear. I will speak with you again when I have clarity, Evelyn managed, voice steady. Until then, let no one speak of me as a possession. With that, she left, not caring if they stood frozen in shock. She needed air, needed a space free from all these suffocating stares. She retreated to the castle gardens, a sprawling stretch of manicured hedges and midnight blue roses. Usually, the garden brought her solace. Today, it stirred only restless anxiety. Birds perched on tall hedges, chirping obliviously while her life disintegrated. She wandered aimlessly until she found a secluded stone bench beneath an arbor laden with late-blooming wisteria. The sweet scent tangled with the crisp autumn breeze. Evelyn slumped onto the bench, letting her shoulders sag in exhaustion. Her hand slipped beneath the neckline of her gown, fingers brushing the faint shimmer of a new mark. A bizarre wave of warmth coursed through her, carrying an undercurrent of longing. Longing for what? She tried to tamp it down, terrified by the idea that her soul could be forging a connection to Caden without her conscious consent. "I won't trust fate again," she whispered to the empty garden, voice trembling. "I won't trust anyone so easily." The rustle of footsteps snapped her attention to a figure approaching through the hedges. Alarm spiked. She'd have fled if not for the hint of familiarity in that presence. Emerging into view came Alpha Caden, cloak billowing in the gentle wind. She tensed. "Following me?" His lips curved in a wry half-smile. "Hardly. I asked the guards where I might find you, and one suggested the gardens." She almost snapped at him to leave. But her wolf stirred, recognizing something in his presence. She sighed, fatigue winning out over hostility. "Let me guess. The elders demanded you convince me or something?" He stepped closer, stopping a respectful distance away. The perfume of wisteria swirled between them. "On the contrary, they'd likely prefer I vanish. But I needed to ensure you're not overwhelmed." She barked a soft laugh, harsh and tinged with despair. "Overwhelmed? That's an understatement." Caden's silver gaze rested gently on her. "I know. I see it in your eyes. The heartbreak, the shock. You've lost your home, your mate, your title, everything. If I could spare you this, I would." Her chest tightened. "But you're the one claiming I was never Aldrich's. How am I supposed to feel about that? I gave him 5 years of my life, believing wholeheartedly that we were fated." Caden's expression softened with sympathy. "I don't blame you for resenting me. You have every right. Yet, look at your mark. Ask yourself if a goddess-given mate bond would collapse so easily." She pressed a trembling hand to her chest. "I don't want another bond. I can't just leap into a second mate's arms after Aldrich cast me aside. It feels wrong." He nodded. "That's why I said I won't force anything. If the bond forms, it'll do so on its own. If it doesn't, I'll accept that." Her gaze darted over his features. She tried to spot deception, some cunning motive lurking beneath. Yet all she saw was earnestness, tempered by an undercurrent of power. She swallowed hard. "It's not just the bond. It's the entire kingdom. The elders are raging. Lady Celeste wants me gone, and Aldrich hates you. This could spark a feud between Silver Haven and Blackmoor." Caden's shoulders rose in a slow breath. "Silver Haven is smaller, but we stand by our convictions. I can't let you suffer for a broken bond. If war comes, so be it. But I pray we can avoid that path." She bowed her head, mind spinning. A part of her found it terrifyingly appealing that someone, Caden, would risk so much just to shield her from ridicule. Another part suspected she was nothing but a convenient symbol for him, an excuse to challenge Aldrich's influence. "Why do you care so much?" He hesitated, stepping nearer until only a pace remained between them. "From the moment I felt your anguish, truly felt it as though it tugged on a string in my soul, I realized the goddess guided me here. I can't walk away from that. Nor can I ignore the possibility that you and I share something real." Her throat went tight. She wanted to deny it, but the quiet pull in her chest throbbed. She had no words to refute him. The tender hush of the garden seemed to conspire with his sincerity, cocooning them in a moment that felt painfully intimate. At length, she mustered, "Then, how do we proceed? I can't endure these stares, these debates. I'm tired of feeling like a curiosity in my own home." Caden's eyes flickered with thought. "We could leave. Come to Silver Haven, away from their scrutiny. Give you space to breathe." A flurry of panic and longing swirled in her stomach. That would cause an uproar. He tilted his head. Perhaps. But would it be any worse than staying here, constantly at Aldrich's mercy and Celeste's malice? You deserve a chance to sort out your feelings without a mob peering over your shoulder." Her mind whirled. Aldrich would claim I'm betraying Blackmore. He may declare me a deserter. Isn't he the one who renounced you? The truth in those words stung. Aldrich had indeed thrown her aside. Yet some deep-rooted loyalty still tugged at her. She pictured her years of service, the wolves who trusted her with their problems, the alliances she helped broker. Leaving felt like abandoning them. But maybe the elders were right that she no longer held a place here. "I need time," she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "Time to think, to weigh my duty to the pack against everything else." He nodded solemnly. "Of course." For a moment, he hesitated, then lifted a hand. Gently, carefully, he touched her upper arm. She flinched, not in revulsion, but surprise at the soft warmth that lanced through her. Their eyes locked, the hush more potent than any conversation. "I'll give you as much time as you need, Evelyn. I won't push." Her pulse fluttered in her throat. The faint glow at her collarbone pulsed in response to his nearness, sending a confusing swirl of comfort and fear through her veins. Her wolf stirred, not howling in protest, but curiously. "All right," she managed. "Thank you." He withdrew his hand, stepping back as though respecting a boundary. "I'll be in the guest wing, under guard, I'm sure. Seek me out if you wish." She nodded. Without another word, he turned and disappeared into the hedges, leaving her alone in the quiet garden. She clutched the stone bench to steady herself. Every nerve felt alive, raw. The notion of a second mate bond forming inside her was both terrifying and strangely enthralling. She wanted to dismiss it as a lie, but the slow fade of Aldrich's mark was undeniable, and the blossoming shimmer beneath it refused to be ignored. News of Evelyn's fading mark and the rumored emergence of a second bond spread like wildfire. By midday, courtiers whispered openly in the corridors, and messages came pouring in from lesser lords, each wanting clarification. Allies of Blackmore demanded to know if this bizarre occurrence implied a rift in leadership. Rival packs snickered about the Alpha King's inadequacy. The tension mounted when a delegation arrived from a neighboring pack, demanding an audience with Aldrich, fearing instability might spill across borders. Evelyn, sequestered in her chambers, heard the commotion through parted curtains. She paced relentlessly, that subtle glow under her skin an ever-present reminder that fate wasn't through with her. She half expected Aldrich to storm in, furious that she still breathed in his halls. But he did not appear. From Lucien's guarded updates, she learned that Aldrich met with the delegation in private, presumably assuring them he remained in control. Meanwhile, Caden stayed under constant watch in the guest wing, though he showed no hostility. Late afternoon brought a knock at Evelyn's door. Lucilla entered, carrying a small silver tray with a folded parchment. "A letter for you, my..." "Evelyn," she said, offering a shy smile. Evelyn took it, eyebrows lifted in curiosity. The parchment bore no seal, just her name scrawled in a graceful hand. She dismissed Lucilla gently and broke the wax. Inside, she found a brief note.
"Evelyn, I realize our dynamic has changed in the worst possible way, but we need to talk without an audience. Meet me in the old armory at dusk. There are matters that must be addressed privately. Aldrich."
Her heart lurched. Aldrich wanted a private conversation? After casting her away, ignoring her for half the day, now he called her to an armory rendezvous? It reeked of potential confrontation. Yet a part of her, still bound to old memories, longed for answers. If it was closure she needed, perhaps this was it. The hour of dusk arrived with streaks of pink and orange slashing the horizon. She stole quietly through lesser-used corridors, descending a back staircase until she reached the old armory, a space rarely entered, as Blackmore had a newer weapons hall. It stood behind a thick wooden door reinforced with rivets. She pushed it open, the hinges groaning. Moonlight streamed in through narrow windows, illuminating rows of outdated swords, spears, and shields arranged on racks. Dust motes drifted in the glow. In the center stood Aldrich. He turned at her entrance, tension marking every line of his powerful form. They regarded each other in silence. Evelyn forced herself to breathe, to ignore the pang of remembered hurt. Aldrich's gaze swept over her, lingering on her collarbone as though expecting to see a literal sign of her betrayal. "You came," he said softly. She folded her arms. "I want to hear what you have to say." A moment passed before he exhaled, stepping closer. "I owe you an apology. Publicly throwing you aside like that. It was cruel. I convinced myself that I had no choice, that the elders demanded it. But maybe that was a coward's excuse. I see that now." Evelyn's throat tightened. "An apology, albeit late. Why tell me this now?" He raked a hand through his hair, clearly agitated. "Because your closeness with Caden is driving me mad. I can't stand seeing another alpha claim your heart. My wolf is in turmoil, rebelling, like I can't bear the thought of losing you, even though I cast you out." He let out a frustrated growl. "It makes no sense." Her pulse hammered. "That's the mate bond you severed struggling to hold on, isn't it? You're the one who wanted me gone. Now you regret it." He grimaced. "Yes, but it's more than regret. This second bond of yours, it's not right, Evelyn. I feel it. It's unnatural." She pressed her lips together. "It's not as if I asked for it. Did you ask for Celeste to replace me?" He flinched. "That was the Elder's push. I never truly wanted Celeste. I just thought an heir would fix our problems." His gaze dropped. "I was a fool." She scoffed quietly. "And I was left shattered. Now, this new bond is forming. Maybe it's the goddess's way of punishing us both." He swallowed. "Punishing me, perhaps. But you did nothing wrong. You deserve better than an alpha who faltered." A wave of sorrow swelled. This was the Aldrich she remembered. Vulnerable, caring, if only for fleeting moments. She took a halting step toward him. "Why did you let the elders win? We could have stood together." He lowered his head, eyes dark with shame. "I was scared, Evelyn. Scared that I'd let the pack down, that I'd fail them if we never produced an heir. I thought, by removing you, I'd remove the problem. But the real problem was me." A silence crackled, thick with unspoken hurt. Evelyn's heart wavered, old love clashing with fresh betrayal. She recalled warm mornings in his arms, yet now a half-formed bond with another alpha pulsed in her veins. She pressed a hand to her collarbone, as though it might quell the swirl of emotion. Aldrich's eyes followed the motion, darkening. That new mark. Does it truly burn for him?" She trembled. "I don't know. It's there, like a flicker I can't extinguish. If you wanted me to remain yours, you shouldn't have severed our bond." A tortured sound escaped him. In 2 strides, he closed the distance, grasping her shoulders. "Let me fix it," he pleaded, voice raw. "If we renew our bond, strengthen it somehow, maybe the goddess will hear us." Her pulse leapt in alarm. "Renew our bond? After all you've done, after what I've felt? You think it's that simple?" His grip tightened. "We can try, Evelyn. By the old rites, we can attempt to reforge the mate link. Our wolves can reconcile. Please." She remembered the pain of being rejected, the humiliation, the shift in her soul that told her something had irrevocably changed. Renew the bond? Could that even be done? The mere idea made her chest feel like it was splitting. She shook her head, tears gathering. "Aldrich, I can't just pretend none of this happened. And what about the new bond that might be forming? Is that supposed to vanish because you changed your mind?" Fury and despair warred in his expression. "Yes, it should vanish. You are always mine. This second bond is an abomination." Before she could protest, his lips crashed onto hers, an urgent, desperate kiss. At one time, she might have melted into his embrace. Now, shock rippled through her, and the glow at her collarbone blazed with heat, not in resonance, but in alarm. She jerked away, pushing against his chest. "Stop," she gasped, eyes blazing with tears. The old bond's echo stirred a swirl of heartbreak, but the new flicker inside her roiled in dissonance. "Don't do this." Panting, Aldrich staggered back, anguish etched on his features. "Forgive me. I can't lose you to him." A tempest of emotion raged inside her. She pressed a trembling hand over her mouth, tears threatening to spill anew. He was the mate she'd cherished for years, but he'd cast her aside like an afterthought. Now he demanded she return, as if her heart was a piece of property to reclaim. Steeling herself, she stepped back, shaking her head. Maybe we both lost each other already. Defeat shadowed his face. Evelyn. She turned and fled, tears blurring her vision, slipping out of the armory before his voice could sway her. Every footstep resonated with heartbreak. She felt the old bond battered by sorrow, the new bond uncertain but alive, and her own will caught in the crossfire. Nightfall draped Blackmoor Castle in a hush, broken only by distant howls from patrolling wolves. Evelyn retreated to her chambers, chest aching with a whirlwind of conflicting desires. She sank onto her bed, fingering the faint shimmer of the half-formed mark. Her mind replayed Aldrich's plea, his raw desire to reclaim what he'd forsaken. But the memory of that forced kiss stirred not passion, but a sense of violation. Caden's face hovered at the edge of her thoughts, calm and resolute, offering choice rather than possession. She closed her eyes, letting tears slip down her cheeks. The entire werewolf kingdom might crumble under the weight of this unprecedented shift. Aldrich refused to let her go. Caden offered her a new fate. And she just wanted to breathe, to exist without the heaviness of heartbreak and endless scrutiny. Quietly, she prayed. Moon Goddess, if you can hear me, show me a path that doesn't end in more pain. Help me find the strength to choose what's right for me, not for them. As she prayed, the mark glowed faintly beneath her palm, a subtle warmth that felt neither foreign nor forced. For the first time, she wondered if this new bond could be a genuine second chance rather than a cruel twist of fate. Could she dare to embrace it? Sleep claimed her in a haze of exhaustion. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more condemnation, and the unstoppable transformation of her mark. Whether she chose to accept it or not, destiny advanced like a shadow at dawn. And in her dreams, she saw silver eyes gleaming in moonlight, quiet and unwavering, waiting for her to decide. Silver Haven lay cradled in the misty highlands, a hidden realm whispered about in half-forgotten legends. Evelyn first glimpsed its spires through the swirling fog, a collection of pale towers rising like moonlit ghosts against the rugged mountains. Even from a distance, she sensed a tangible hum in the air, as though this territory vibrated with untapped magic. It felt unlike anything she'd known in Blackmoor, whose fortress walls were steeped more in iron discipline than ethereal wonder. Caden led her party up the winding path to the city gates, a small escort of Silver Haven wolves flanking them. Though she tried to remain poised, Evelyn clutched the reins of her borrowed horse with clammy fingers. She was leaving Blackmoor behind, at least temporarily, escaping the suffocating tension and heartbreak. But the unknown pressed in on her like a gathering storm. Just a little farther, Caden called over his shoulder. He rode ahead, guiding them with unerring confidence along the precarious cliffside trail. His silver eyes frequently flicked back to check on Evelyn, ensuring she managed the journey well. She hated the flutter of relief she felt at his concern. Part of her still fought against any bond with this alpha who had upended her life. Behind them, a cluster of rogue hills gave way to the watchtowers of Silver Haven, where sentinels stood, bows at the ready. But when they recognized Caden's crest pinned to his cloak, a stylized moon and wolf emblem, they relaxed, signaling the gates to open. A hush of awe settled over Evelyn as she passed into a courtyard paved with white stone, each tile etched with curling script. It felt as though she were entering not just another castle, but another world. A wave of whispers rippled among the guards. Evelyn caught fragments. That's her, the second bond, prophecy. The words set her nerves on edge. So, the rumors had preceded her. Any hope of anonymity was gone the moment she crossed Silver Haven's threshold. She dismounted, ignoring her trembling legs, and looked around. Where Blackmoor was built of dark stone and iron, Silver Haven shone with pale marble and polished crystal that refracted daylight into prismatic flecks on the ground. Wolves of various ranks bustled across the courtyard, many wearing robes or cloaks embroidered with crescent motifs. She noticed more than a few turned eyes toward her, curiosity and reverence blending in their gazes. "Come," Caden said gently, offering a hand. "I'll show you to your quarters. Then you can rest before we discuss everything." She managed a nod, too weary to argue. The journey had taken days, slipping past the borders of Blackmoor under cover of secrecy. Though she knew Aldrich would label her a deserter, a traitor even, she needed distance, needed space to breathe. Yet guilt gnawed at her for abandoning the wolves who once looked to her as Luna. They made their way through a tall archway into a sprawling hall that defied conventional architecture. Soft moonlight-like radiance poured from lanterns shaped like glowing crystals, illuminating high ceilings adorned with murals of wolves dancing under the phases of the moon. Evelyn paused to gawk at the sheer artistry. "Welcome to our seat of power," Caden said. "We call it the Moon Hall." He gestured toward a wide corridor leading deeper inside. "Your room will be this way. My people can guide you anywhere else you wish to go." Her chest felt tight, part awe, part anxiety. "This place is stunning. It feels ancient." He smiled, though a flicker of concern traced his features. "It is. Silver Haven predates many Pact's founding. Our ancestors believed in living closer to the goddess's will, embracing magic and prophecy more than brute force. But that doesn't mean we're weak," he added quickly. She gave him a searching look. "I never said you were weak. Just different." He inclined his head, acknowledging her point. Several robed attendants approached, bowing to Caden before turning their attention to Evelyn. A tall woman with braided silver hair introduced herself as Valeska. "It is an honor, my lady," she said, voice warm. "We've prepared a suite for you. Please follow me." Evelyn followed in a daze, climbing curved staircases lined with luminous crystals. The air felt charged with a subtle energy that made her skin tingle. Part of her wolf stirred in response, both apprehensive and curious. At length, they reached a serene corridor where an ornate door stood ajar. Inside was a suite that took her breath away, delicate tapestries depicting moonlit forests, plush seating around a fireplace, and wide windows offering a vista of distant mountains wreathed in mist. "Is this?" Evelyn swallowed. "Are you sure this room is for me?" Valeska inclined her head. "By Alpha Caden's command. He wishes you to be comfortable, especially while you acclimate to our ways." Evelyn could only nod, murmuring thanks as she stepped inside. Valeska departed, leaving her alone in the hush of the chamber. She sank onto a cushioned bench near the window, letting out a trembling breath. This is real. She'd left Blackmoor behind, left Aldrich behind, to dwell in a kingdom of prophecy and magic, all because of a half-formed bond that refused to vanish. Her hand drifted to the faint shimmer beneath her collarbone. Though it didn't burn as painfully as before, it pulsed with a gentle warmth that both unsettled and intrigued her. She wondered if the goddess truly orchestrated this second bond, or if some cosmic mistake forced her into yet another puppet role. She was tired of fate dictating her every move. A sudden knock at the door made her jump. She called for them to enter. Caden stepped in, his expression cautious. "I hope the suite pleases you. I know it's a lot to take in." She forced a small smile. "It's beautiful. And strange. Your kingdom feels like a world apart." "That it is," he agreed, gaze wandering the room before landing on her. "I won't keep you, but there is someone who wishes to speak with you, an elder from our domain, a seer named Taryn. She believes she has information about your condition." Evelyn's pulse quickened. "Condition?" He hesitated. "This second bond. Your connection to the goddess, if that's what it truly is. Taryn studies ancient scrolls. She thinks you may possess a rare ability that ties back to our earliest myths." Weariness tugged at Evelyn's limbs. She wanted to bury her head under blankets and forget the outside world. But the mention of an ability snagged her attention, overshadowing her exhaustion. "All right," she said. "If it helps me understand what's happening, I'll talk to her." Caden's relief showed in the slight relaxation of his posture. "She's waiting in the library. Are you ready to go now, or do you need a moment?" A part of her wanted to say she needed a week just to breathe, but she merely shook her head. "Let's get this over with." Soft candlelight and the gentle glow of crystal lanterns lit the library's soaring shelves. The room smelled of parchment and old leather, a quiet haven where knowledge had been carefully hoarded over centuries. Evelyn followed Caden between towering bookcases filled with tomes bound in exotic hides, their spines emblazoned with strange symbols. A single figure stood at a reading table near the center, a tall woman with a regal bearing, draped in layered robes of midnight blue. Wisps of silver hair framed a face etched with fine lines of wisdom rather than age. She turned as they approached, her eyes, one green, one milky white, fixing on Evelyn with startling intensity. Alpha Caden. The woman's voice rang in the hush. And this must be Evelyn, the woman of two bonds. An uneasy prickle raced down Evelyn's spine. Yes, she managed. Taryn, Caden said by way of introduction. She's the most respected seer in Silverhaven. Taryn dipped her head in a gesture that felt more acknowledgement than bow. I've heard the rumors, but seeing you in person confirms much. The aura around you is unusual. Evelyn swallowed. You said you had information about me? Taryn beckoned for them to join her at the table. A massive, time-worn book lay open, its yellowed pages filled with curling script and illustrations depicting wolves beneath myriad moons. Evelyn recognized some of the runes from old Blackmoor texts, but many were foreign. We have an archive of prophecies spanning centuries, Taryn explained. Some are obscure fragments hinting at future events. Others remain unsolved. But one has haunted me for decades, speaking of a Luna who would carry the mark of two alphas. Her gaze flicked meaningfully to Evelyn's collarbone. The prophecy states she will stand at a crossroads of fate, with power to remake or destroy the unity of Wolfind. Evelyn's stomach swooped. That can't possibly be me. I never had any magical power in Blackmoor. Taryn's lips curved. Power often remains dormant until a trigger awakens it. In your case, the trigger may be the severed bond, an unnatural event that forced your spirit to seek the goddess's guidance. Now, a second bond forms, an anomaly that suggests the goddess indeed has her hands in your destiny. Caden set a hand on the edge of the table, knuckles whitening. So Evelyn might be the one the prophecy references. But what does it mean by power to remake or destroy unity? Taryn's gaze never left Evelyn. If she embraces this bond, this primal link to the goddess, she may gain the ability to influence the mate bonds of others. There are legends of a Luna so in tune with Celera, the moon goddess, that she could sense and even alter the spiritual threads binding wolves together. Evelyn felt as though the floor had vanished beneath her feet. That's impossible, she whispered. You're saying I could break or create bonds? Not create bonds from nothing, Taryn corrected softly. But you might strengthen them, weaken them, or unravel them entirely, depending on your intent. You'd be a living fulcrum for the magic behind the mate bond. If used for peace, you could heal broken pacts, unify warring factions. If misused, she trailed off, letting the implication hang. Evelyn's heart pounded, a wave of panic rising. But I never asked for this. I don't want such power. I just wanted to be a decent Luna, and now that's gone. I'm lost. Taryn closed the tome with a gentle thud. The prophecy says your choice will shape the fate of all wolves. Some may worship you as a savior, others will fear you as a threat. Your path is uncertain. Caden rubbed a hand across his chin, eyes darting to Evelyn. This changes everything. If the news spreads that Evelyn can manipulate bonds, many packs would see her as either a weapon or a danger. Evelyn swallowed hard. Including Aldrich? A quiet hush followed her question. They all knew the answer. Blackmoor's Alpha would never tolerate Evelyn wielding a power that might overshadow his authority, especially after the humiliation he felt when she left with Caden. A sick dread curled in her stomach, recalling how proud and possessive Aldrich could be. Taryn's expression turned grave. A man who's already declared war in his heart will find any excuse to claim you or destroy you. If word reaches Blackmoor that you carry the key to every mate bond in the kingdom, it will provoke fear and aggression. Caden straightened, a steely resolve settling over him. Then we protect her. She won't face that threat alone. Evelyn's throat tightened. She felt like a traveler caught in a deadly crossroads. On one side, Blackmoor, her former home, threatened by Aldrich's sense of betrayal. On the other, Silver Haven, offering her sanctuary but also entangling her in a prophecy that could incite widespread conflict. All because of an unwanted second bond that awakened a power she wasn't sure she could handle. She pinned Taryn with a desperate gaze. How do I control it? How do I stop it from hurting people or from becoming a tool to wage war? Taryn's expression softened with compassion. That, child, is the crux of your journey. I can teach you the basics of focusing your inner energy, but true mastery requires time and acceptance of who you're meant to be. Acceptance. The word tasted bitter on Evelyn's tongue. She craved normalcy, to be free of cosmic obligations. Yet the faint glow at her collarbone thrummed with an odd reassurance, as if the goddess whispered, "You have a purpose." Frightening and humbling all at once. She sat heavily on a wooden stool, exhaling shakily. I don't know if I can do this. Caden rested a cautious hand on her shoulder. The warmth of his touch radiated across her skin, igniting that new bond's gentle spark. She no longer flinched from it. Despite her reservations, his presence steadied her. You're not alone, Evelyn, he said quietly. Silverhaven stands with you. I stand with you. A lump clogged her throat. She nodded, brushing away the sting of tears. She'd lost too much already, her role, her home, the mate bond she believed was forever. If she was to find any measure of hope or purpose, perhaps it lay in unraveling this prophecy. All right, she whispered, lifting her chin. Teach me. Taryn's approving smile had a hint of sadness, as though she understood the weight Evelyn bore. We'll begin at first light tomorrow. For now, rest. Strengthen your body, for once you delve into the goddess's magic, it can test the limits of your spirit. Before Evelyn could respond, a frantic pounding echoed in the library's entryway. A young Silver Haven wolf rushed in, breathless. Alpha, he gasped at Caden, a messenger from Blackmoor's border just arrived. Aldrich's forces gather. He's declared war. A chill seized the room. Evelyn's heart thumped painfully. She'd known Aldrich's wrath would come, but hearing it spelled out hit like a blow to the gut. Caden's jaw tightened. Where are they assembled? Near the pass leading into the White Peak region, the messenger replied. They've blocked travel, stopping anyone suspected of allegiance to Silverhaven. Our scouts say Aldrich's preparing to march. A violent swirl of emotions whipped through Evelyn, guilt, anger, fear. War? Over her? Over the fact that she wouldn't come crawling back after he discarded her? She steadied herself, forcing calm into her voice. How soon until they reach us? The messenger glanced anxiously between them. Days, if they come directly. But he might be rallying allied packs. This could escalate. Taryn closed her eyes, lines of worry deepening around her mouth. The prophecy stirs faster than expected. We must prepare. Caden nodded sharply. Summon my lieutenants for council. We'll defend our borders. Evelyn's blood pounded. Aldrich's domain was vast. Blackmoor commanded a large army. Silverhaven, while rich in mystic knowledge, might be at a numeric disadvantage. And if Aldrich used her departure as a rallying cry, labeling Silverhaven kidnappers or usurpers, she trembled, feeling the weight of a crisis she never meant to start. All those wolves, risking their lives just because Aldrich wants me back? Caden's face hardened. He'll frame it as an attack on his sovereignty, on the sanctity of the mate bond. In truth, it's pride and vengeance. But the result is the same. War. Evelyn bowed her head, shame brimming. If I returned, would it stop? Silence gripped them. Taryn's gaze darkened with worry. Caden looked stricken, as though she'd stabbed him. It might, he said softly, but at what cost to you? She recalled Aldrich's desperation, his attempt to force a renewed bond in the old armory. The memory still made her stomach lurch. Even if she returned, he might not accept the second bond, nor her newly awakened powers. She'd be a prisoner, a trophy to parade in front of the elders. A wave of horror washed over her. I can't, she whispered, shaking her head. I can't go back. I won't. Caden laid a hand on her shoulder again, though she sensed the tension coiled in him. Then we'll stand our ground. Silverhaven will protect you and defend itself. But you must be prepared. Aldrich will spin any story that benefits him. Taryn exhaled. So it begins. War is on our doorstep, and you, Evelyn, may be the only one who can sway the outcome. She felt the new bond flutter in her chest, echoing Caden's resolve. That inexplicable power she supposedly held, linked to the goddess, might prove decisive. She didn't know if she had the courage or the skill to wield it, but innocence on both sides would pay the price if she failed. Clenching her fists, she steadied her voice. Then teach me, she said again, more firmly this time, looking Taryn in the eye. I won't let more wolves suffer because of me. If I have the power to stop this war, I'll do whatever it takes. Taryn's nod held a solemn acceptance. Very well. At dawn, we begin your training. Caden brushed fingertips over Evelyn's shoulder in silent support, then turned to the messenger. Gather my lieutenants in the Moon Hall. We must plan our defense. As the messenger darted away, Evelyn drew a shuddering breath, kneeling by the reading table. She traced the gilded emblem of the moon on its surface, heart heavy with responsibility she never sought. Glancing at Caden and Taryn, both ready to stand beside her in the looming storm, she realized that, for better or worse, she wasn't alone anymore. A tumult of conflicting emotions hammered at her, sorrow for the kingdom she left behind, resentment at Aldrich's arrogance, fear of the prophecy's demands, and a glimmer of determination that she might, at last, shape her own fate. In the hush of the library, lit by candle flame and moonglow crystals, Evelyn whispered a silent vow to the goddess, hoping Celera heard her. I will protect those who believe in me, and spare those who doubt me if I can. Let no more wolves bleed because of a broken bond and wounded pride. Guide me, if you truly will. She rose, the swirling conflict in her chest settling into a fragile resolve. The path ahead was dark and fraught with peril, but for the first time since this nightmare began, she believed she might hold the power to change its course. The flicker beneath her collarbone pulsed in answer, as though the moon goddess gently affirmed, You are more than a discarded Luna, become who you are meant to be. Dawn broke over the peaks of Silverhaven with a hush of golden light, painting the fortress walls in soft hues of rose and tangerine. Yet a heavy tension pressed on every living soul within. Wolves patrolled the ramparts, eyes sharp, scanning the winding roads for the first glimpse of an approaching army. The air crackled with anticipation, as though the very wind sensed the storm of violence to come. Evelyn stood atop the highest tower of Silverhaven's outer wall, hair whipped by a brisk mountain breeze. Below her, the sprawling courtyard bristled with activity. Caden's warriors checked weapons, arranged supply crates, and shared grim nods of resolve. In the distance, the sound of smiths hammering last-minute repairs to armor reverberated. A part of Evelyn's heart clenched at the sight. She'd known conflict was inevitable after Aldrich declared war, yet witnessing the tangible preparations felt like a knife twisting in her gut. Her gaze swept over the distant roads. Though the sky remained clear, a low rumble at the horizon suggested storm clouds gathering. She sensed it wasn't just a natural storm, it was fate, a swirl of raw power on the cusp of erupting. She inhaled, letting the crisp air fill her lungs, and tried to steady herself. No more wolves will bleed for my sake. That vow echoed in her mind, fueling the desperation simmering in her chest. Behind her, footsteps approached. She turned to find Caden climbing the final steps to the parapet. His silver eyes flicked to the vantage point, surveying the same roads Evelyn had been watching. Any sign of them yet? He asked quietly, standing beside her. Not yet, she murmured, but they'll come. He exhaled, jaw set. In the morning light, he looked both resolute and burdened, as though bearing the weight of an entire kingdom's fears. I've sent scouts ahead. They reported Aldrich's forces at the White Peak Pass. He's likely rallying allied packs to march with him. Evelyn gripped the stone parapet with trembling fingers. How many wolves can we muster in defense? Caden's expression darkened. Not as many as Aldrich. Silverhaven is built on knowledge and mystical traditions, not armies. We have skilled warriors, fewer in number, but well-trained. My beta believes we can fortify the pass, but a direct assault would still cost us dearly. He paused, glancing at her face. You're worried. She let out a raw laugh that held more sorrow than mirth. Worry doesn't begin to cover it. If Aldrich attacks, wolves will die. On both sides. I never wanted a war to follow me here. Caden gently laid a hand on her shoulder. No one blames you. Aldrich's pride and thirst for control drove him to this extreme. You have a right to live free from his dictates. Her gaze dropped to the faint glow at her collarbone. The second bond felt more tangible than ever, thrumming with an odd mixture of urgency and compassion. What if we can stop it? Without fighting? A trace of hope flickered in Caden's eyes, but it was shadowed by realism. If you have a plan, I'll listen. But Aldrich, he's convinced he was wronged. That you belong to him. She pressed her lips together, heart twisting at the memory of Aldrich's once kindness turned to fury. He used to love me. But that love had hardened into an obsession with fate and heirs. I have to try, she whispered. A new voice broke into the conversation. Taryn, the seer, robes fluttering as she climbed to join them at the parapet. Her mismatched eyes, one green, one milky white, fixed on Evelyn. The hour of conflict draws near. Are you prepared? Evelyn forced a nod. Taryn had spent days instructing her in the use of her latent power, the ability to sense and subtly manipulate the threads of the mate bond. Though Evelyn remained reluctant to wield it for fear of violating free will, the knowledge alone pulsed through her veins like a quiet current. She wasn't yet sure how it might end the coming violence, but she knew it was key. Taryn stepped closer, the wind tugging at her silvery braids. If Aldrich arrives in full force, bloodshed is almost certain. But you, Evelyn, stand at the crux of a prophecy. Perhaps you can shift the tide. Convince him, or break his will to fight if that is your path. Evelyn swallowed. I'll do whatever it takes to save lives. But I won't force a bond on anyone, or break an existing one without their consent. That would make me no better than Aldrich, deciding fates without care. A soft smile ghosted across Taryn's lips. Then we pray your compassion is enough. She inclined her head toward Caden. Alpha, I sense a gathering storm, one not just of mortal aggression, but something deeper, more divine. Evelyn may not be the only presence guided by the goddess. Solara's hand might intervene in ways we cannot predict. Caden nodded, though the tension along his shoulders betrayed his concern. We'll be ready, one way or another. By midday, Silverhaven's scouts returned with grim news. Aldrich's army had advanced swiftly through White Peak Pass, bypassing lesser fortifications with sheer numbers. Allied packs, each owing fealty to Blackmore or seduced by promises of victory, swelled his ranks. Estimates placed the force at 100 strong, at least double Silverhaven's defenders. Caden convened a council of his betas and key advisors in the Moon Hall. Evelyn sat at the far end, overshadowed by the clamor of urgent war planning. Maps spread across a broad table carved from pale quartz, showing mountain passes, choke points, and potential fallback lines. Wolves argued strategy, some urging immediate fortifications, others pushing for a preemptive strike. Finally, Caden raised a hand, silencing the debate. His voice rumbled with quiet authority. We defend Silverhaven. Our position in the mountains gives us an advantage. We fortify the lower pass and keep archers on the high ridges. We do not march on Aldrich unless forced. Understood. A chorus of affirmatives rippled through the gathered wolves. Taryn caught Evelyn's gaze, a silent question in her eyes. Evelyn simply bowed her head, anxiety roiling in her gut. Is there truly no path to peace? When the council adjourned, Evelyn slipped away into the corridor. She needed air, space to think. The polished floors reflected her silhouette like a ghost, reminding her that she had once walked similar corridors in Blackmore. Now, she was essentially the reason these wolves readied for war. Evelyn, came a soft voice behind her. She turned to find Valeska, the tall attendant who first showed her to her suite. Valeska clasped her hands in front, features tight with concern. The city is preparing for battle. Families with children are moving toward the upper keep, searching for safety. They ask me if the rumors are true, that you hold a power granted by the moon goddess, one that could save them all. Evelyn felt the weight of that expectation press on her chest. I wish I had a certain answer. I only know I'll do all I can to prevent this tragedy. Valeska offered a tremulous smile. Then that is hope enough. She bowed and left Evelyn to her thoughts. Hope. The word clung to Evelyn like a fragile shield. If only she had more than hope, if only she had a plan. They came at dusk. A line of torches flickered on the winding road leading from White Peak Pass, an ominous serpent of light descending into Silver Haven's valley. From atop the wall, Evelyn's breath caught at the sheer scope. Aldrich's host, bristling with spears and carrying banners marked by Blackmore's crest. A chill of memory shuddered through her. She recognized the colors of allied packs woven into the ranks. Some of these wolves she had once greeted in Blackmore's courtyard, offering them courtesy as their Luna. Now they marched with grim faces toward her new home, prepared to raise it if commanded. Alarm bells tolled across Silver Haven. Warriors assumed their positions. Archers lined the parapets. Caden, clad in light armor, joined Evelyn at the vantage point near the main gate. His expression hardened into calm determination, though a flicker of sadness betrayed his regret. Remember, he murmured to the anxious wolves around them, we fight only if attacked. Let's see if any reason remains in Aldrich's mind. Torchlight illuminated Aldrich's vanguard as they neared. Wolves bearing heavy shields formed a wedge, behind which soared Blackmore's banner, a dark field with two entwined wolves under a single moon. Evelyn's gut twisted at the sight. The man leading that wedge was none other than Beta Lucian, once her loyal ally. He had always been torn between duty to Aldrich and compassion for Evelyn. Now, it seemed duty prevailed. Aldrich himself rode behind Lucian, a massive black stallion stamping at the rocky path. He wore ornate battle leathers, the familiar gold torque around his throat, face set in cold fury. Even from the wall's distance, Evelyn could sense his power, dominance radiating in waves that made lesser wolves quail. Once, that presence had comforted her, now it loomed like a thunderhead, threatening devastation. Aldrich reined his horse to a halt within shouting distance of the gates. His voice, amplified by the hush of the valley, rumbled across the stone walls. Silver Haven. I come for Evelyn, my Luna, stolen from me by deception and foul trickery. Yield her, and perhaps I'll spare your city. A ripple of rage bristled among Silver Haven's defenders. Caden stepped forward on the parapet, fists clenched. You claim foul trickery, Aldrich? It was your rejection that severed Evelyn's bond and drove her away. She is here by her own will. Aldrich's eyes burned hot, scanning the battlements until he spotted Evelyn behind Caden. For a moment, raw emotion crossed his features, anger, hurt, longing. Then his jaw tightened, voice turning harsh. Evelyn, come down. Enough of this charade. You belong at my side, not in the den of liars. She trembled, stepping forward enough to be seen by the torchlight. Aldrich, please stop this. This war will gain you nothing but bloodshed. His lips curled in a bitter snarl. You're my mate, ordained by the goddess once. Do you deny it? Her heart twisted painfully. You were once my mate, yes. But you cast me aside. I can't change what's happened. A snarl of frustration tore from his throat. I renounced our bond for the pack's future, not so some upstart alpha could lay false claim to you. This second bond is an abomination. I'll break it myself if I must. A hiss of shock whispered through the ranks of Silver Haven archers. Caden's posture stiffened, voice stony. Threaten my people again, Aldrich, and you'll regret it. Aldrich flung out a hand in a scornful gesture. Your people? They're misguided fools, cowering behind your illusions. Evelyn is mine, and I'll raise this fortress if that's what it takes. He gestured to Beta Lucian, who lifted his spear in silent command. The front ranks of Blackmore's warriors advanced, bristling with lethal intent. Evelyn's stomach lurched. Here it is, the spark that ignites war. She whirled to Caden. Please, let me talk to him alone. Maybe I can reason. Too late. As the enemy advanced, Silverhaven's defenders launched warning shots, arrows thudding into the ground before the front line, forcing them back a step. Tension ignited like dry tinder. A shout went up from Aldrich's side, and they charged. Arrows whistled. Wolves snarled. Spears clashed against shields. The clang of metal on metal and the roar of battle filled the valley. Caden barked orders, his voice lost amid the chaos. Evelyn's heart pounded so fiercely she thought it might burst. Though she had trained in self-defense as Luna, witnessing the savage reality of so many wolves locked in combat was more terrifying than she'd ever imagined. Aldrich's first wave smashed into Silverhaven's forward line, buckling under the defenders' pikes. Screams mingled with war cries. Bodies fell. Blood sprayed across the pale stones of the gateway. Horrified, Evelyn covered her mouth, tears burning her eyes. She prayed for the cruelty to end. No more, no more. On the parapet, Taryn and several robed figures chanted softly, weaving a protective ward that shimmered like moonlit frost along the battlements. It repelled arrows and reduced the brunt of physical force, but it couldn't fully stop a determined onslaught. Slowly, Aldrich's warriors pushed forward, stepping over the fallen. Evelyn's fists clenched. Maybe, if I try. She closed her eyes, reaching inward for that intangible current Taryn had taught her to sense. The swirling essence of mate bond magic, the threads binding wolves to one another. She'd practiced on small tests, gently soothing tense pack mates or fortifying a struggling bond. This was different, a chaotic storm of violence, hundreds of connections overlapping. Anxiety twisted in her gut as she probed the edges of that swirling tapestry, feeling the pain and anger saturating each thread. Too big. Too intense. A clang rang out dangerously close. She opened her eyes to see the line of Blackmoor warriors nearly breaching the gatehouse. Fear spiked. If they broke through, the city's interior would become a slaughterhouse. She scanned for Aldrich, but he was lost in the melee, a towering figure driving his stallion through the fray. Evelyn, Caden shouted, voice strained. He'd drawn a slender sword, the polished steel stained with fresh blood. Stay back. She shook her head fiercely. I can't just watch this massacre. Summoning a courage born of desperation, she closed her eyes again, this time diving deeper into that psychic realm of bonds. The intensity hammered her senses. So many hearts pounding with rage or terror, so many connections flaring in distress. Her spirit strained to glean a single cohesive thread among them, and then she found it. Aldrich's presence, pulsing like a thunderstorm on the horizon. The bond they once shared still left a faint scar in her soul, resonating enough for her to sense him. It flickered erratically, twisted by fury and a possessive drive that overshadowed all reason. She inhaled, bracing herself. If I can just reach him, not physically, but through the bond's echo, maybe she could calm the rage, or show him the agony he was inflicting. Picturing his face, she pushed a wave of empathy through that flicker, a plea for peace. The emotional strain seared her mind like branding iron. She gasped, nearly collapsing under the metaphysical weight. Somewhere in the chaos, Aldrich stiffened. Evelyn felt him pause, confusion swirling. For a heartbeat, the advance of his forces wavered. Wolves on both sides hesitated, uncertain. She glimpsed a moment in which he sensed her attempt, teetering on the edge of halting the battle. Hope sparked in her chest. Then, a vicious snarl tore from him, reverberating through their psychic link. He rejected her attempt, severing the ephemeral contact with brutal force. The backlash slammed into Evelyn's consciousness like a physical blow, sending her reeling on the parapet. She cried out, vision sparking red. Pain lanced through her head. She dimly felt Caden's arms catching her before she hit the ground. Through bleary eyes, she made out Caden's worried face. Evelyn, what did you do? She coughed, tears stinging. Tried to reach him. He shut me out. Her voice shook with agony. I can't do it again, I'm not strong enough. Anger flashed in Caden's eyes. He looked down at the savage battle below. Then we fight on our terms. He glanced at Taryn, who nodded grimly. Silverhaven's defenders rallied around the gate, forging a tighter line. Arrows rained from the walls, picking off Aldrich's warriors. The stench of blood and panic choked the air. But it was still not enough to halt Blackmore's momentum. Slowly, relentlessly, they pushed forward, climbing over the wounded and dying. Aldrich, flanked by Lucien, forced an opening at the main gate. Silverhaven wolves shrank back from the brutal onslaught, leaving bodies strewn like broken dolls. Evelyn's heart twisted in despair. So much death, all because of me. Rage and sorrow pooled in her chest, fueling a desperate urge to do something. She gritted her teeth, ignoring the pounding in her skull. She reached for that swirling tapestry of bonds again, but this time she aimed not at Aldrich, but at the collective wave of aggression saturating every soldier he commanded. No. Taryn's voice hissed across their bond, faint but urgent. That is too large, too risky. Evelyn blocked out the warning. If she could quell the tide of violence, even for a moment, maybe they could parley. She pressed her consciousness into the emotional current enveloping Aldrich's army, seeking the threads of fear, loyalty, compulsion, the intangible ties that bound them under Aldrich's command. A swirl of agony battered her mind. Hundreds of wolves, some driven by a sense of duty, others by raw terror, others by blind rage. She felt them all at once, an overwhelming wave that threatened to crush her sanity. She gasped, tears streaming, but refused to let go. No more death. She breathed the mantra like a prayer. With trembling resolve, she projected a wave of calm, like a gentle hush across the tapestry. She pushed empathy and compassion, urging them to see the madness in slaughtering fellow wolves. The strain made her head pound, blood trickling from her nose. The world around her dimmed to a roar of chaotic emotions. For an impossible heartbeat, it worked. Across the battlefield, wolves faltered, confusion in their eyes. Some dropped weapons, hearts hammered by an alien sense of doubt. Even the lines of Silverhaven's defenders paused, startled by the sudden lull. Evelyn's vision blurred, but relief flickered in her chest. Yes, please, let this end. A savage roar tore the fragile peace apart. Aldrich, from the midst of the fray, sensed Evelyn's interference. With a raw burst of alpha power, he roused his warriors anew. The savage bond of loyalty and fear reasserted itself. Silverhaven's attempt at respite shattered as a renewed battle cry ripped through the ranks, driving them forward once more. Evelyn's psyche reeled under the recoil, a crash of psychic force so great she lost her balance, slumping against the parapet. The last thing she heard was Caden calling her name, the clang of steel, and the screams of wolves locked in mortal combat. When Evelyn next opened her eyes, she found herself floating in a space of soft silver luminescence. The tumult of the battlefield was gone, replaced by a profound stillness. Slowly, she turned, her body felt weightless, and saw no walls, no ground, just a boundless expanse of moonlit haze. A gentle voice, neither male nor female, resonated around her. Child of two bonds, why do you suffer so? She spun, searching for the speaker. A shape began to coalesce in the glow, a radiant silhouette of a wolf, its features indistinct, yet brimming with an awe-inspiring presence. Evelyn's heart lurched. The moon goddess. Could it be? Her throat tightened. She bowed instinctively. Moon goddess. Celera, she whispered, voice trembling. The figure's head inclined in a graceful nod. Yes, my daughter. Your pleas reached me in the tides of destiny. Emotion surged in Evelyn's chest. Hope, fear, reverence. Please, goddess. My world is falling apart. Wolves are dying because of a bond one never asked for. Tell me how to stop this. A warm, melancholic tone colored the goddess's reply. I cannot choose for you, child. I gave wolves free will, that they might learn to love, to fight, to heal on their own accord. This war is a test, not only for you, but for Aldrich and Caden as well. Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes. It's unbearable. I tried to quell the violence. But Aldrich's rage is stronger. Am I doomed to watch them all destroy each other? The goddess's presence emanated quiet comfort. You are not doomed. You have the power to guide them away from destruction, yet free will remains. You cannot force peace upon hearts that cling to hatred. Evelyn's voice cracked. Then what do I do? I can't let them kill each other. A gentle nudge of spiritual energy brushed Evelyn's mind. Look within. Your second bond was no accident. Like all second chances, it is a choice. Guide them. Show them you will not be possessed nor used as a tool for pride. If Aldrich cannot relinquish his bitterness, his path leads only to ruin. Sorrow thrummed through Evelyn's soul, but also a glimmer of determination. She understood, on some deep level, that the goddess's test was about more than just ending this war. It was about declaring her own autonomy, forging a path of compassion that respected every wolf's right to choose. And if Aldrich refused to relinquish his twisted claim, the bloodshed might continue, or Evelyn might have to break his bond forcibly. She closed her eyes, letting tears fall. I will try, she whispered. I swear. The goddess's voice softened, fading like a moonbeam at dawn. Then awaken, child, and walk your path with courage. Evelyn jolted awake in Silverhaven's infirmary, gasping for air. Pain lanced through her head, and the tang of healing salves filled her nostrils. A cool hand pressed against her forehead, Taryn, leaning over her with relief flooding her mismatched eyes. Caden stood just behind, armor scuffed and stained with battle. He exhaled, tension leaving his posture. She's awake. His voice trembled with gratitude. Evelyn, thank the goddess. She tried to sit up, wincing. What happened? Taryn's gaze flicked to Caden, who answered softly, You collapsed after trying to subdue the entire army's emotions. We managed to hold the gate, but many lives were lost. Aldrich pulled back at nightfall, maybe to regroup. Right now, we have a lull. Evelyn's heart clenched. How many? Caden's face darkened, anger and grief mingling. Too many. We gave them heavier losses, though. Aldrich retreated with his wounded, but they're still nearby. The night is quiet, but it's the hush before a storm. He'll attack again. She closed her eyes, swallowing back tears. It felt like her best efforts had done nothing but buy a few hours of respite. The moon goddess's words reverberated in her mind. You cannot force peace upon hearts that cling to hatred. Taryn's voice steadied her. We heard your cry. Your power reached far but was rebuffed by Aldrich's will. The goddess must have intervened to keep you alive after such an exertion. Evelyn's breath hitched. She spoke to me. She said this war is a test of free will versus destiny. She braced herself, memories flashing. I have to show them I won't be owned or forced. Aldrich must see that if he continues, he destroys everything. Caden's gaze softened with empathy. And if he won't see? Her throat tightened. Then, I might have to sever his bond to me completely. Destroy that last thread of matehood that anchors him to the past. Maybe that's the only way to free him from his obsession. A heavy silence fell, the finality of that choice echoing through the infirmary. To break a bond so utterly, especially one that once shaped her entire life, was a terrifying prospect. But if that was the price to end the carnage, Taryn nodded as though hearing her thoughts. It is a grave power. But if used with mercy, it could stop more bloodshed. She gently touched Evelyn's arm. Rest tonight. When dawn comes, we'll face the next assault. Perhaps the goddess grants you one more chance to sway Aldrich's heart. Evelyn leaned back, exhaustion pressing down on her. The rhythmic ache in her skull pulsed in time with her uncertain heartbeat. Closing her eyes, she clung to the goddess's parting words. Show them you will not be possessed nor used as a tool for pride. Across the fortress walls, the hush of night reigned, broken only by the soft moans of the injured and the hushed steps of weary wolves. In the darkness beyond Silverhaven's lights, Aldrich's camp glowed with scattered torches. He loomed somewhere in that gloom, perhaps wrestling with inner doubts or fueling his vendetta. Evelyn prayed he might find reason before it was too late. Deep inside, a quiet, fragile hope kindled. She had endured heartbreak, discovered a second bond, and awakened powers that both awed and terrified her. Tomorrow would decide whether war would consume them all, or whether she could guide them away from the precipice. The path was hers to forge, and only free will, hers and Aldrich's, would determine the outcome. Gray thunderheads loomed over the battlements of Silverhaven, casting shifting shadows across the courtyards below. The autumn winds swept through the fortress with a restless chill, stirring an unspoken tension among the wolves. They had endured days of brutal skirmishes at the gates, each more devastating than the last. Now, both sides prepared for a final clash, one that would decide the fate not only of Silverhaven and Blackmoor, but the entire werewolf realm. Evelyn stood upon the highest parapet, the biting wind lashing at her unbound hair. She breathed in the icy air and closed her eyes, recalling the moon goddess's parting words, "Show them you will not be possessed nor used as a tool for pride." She felt an electric hum deep beneath her collarbone, where the second bond once glowed in her flesh. Her empathic power, this gift or curse from the goddess, thrummed, amplifying the swirl of emotion saturating the fortress. Most of all, she sensed the tension of the opposing armies coiled beyond the walls, ready to strike at dawn. Footsteps approached. She opened her eyes to see Caden at her side, his silver gaze heavy with concern. A hush lingered between them, taut with all the unspoken conflicts that had led them here. He was the alpha of Silverhaven, the man whose presence first shattered her old life in Blackmoor. He had challenged the notion that she belonged to Aldrich, offering her freedom and a chance to choose. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. In the courtyard below, Silverhaven warriors hurried to reinforce the gates, piling sandbags and bracing sharpened stakes. Archers checked quivers, while robed mystics stood by to offer magical wards. Everyone knew the morning would bring the decisive assault. Evelyn swallowed hard, heart throbbing with the knowledge that many wolves on both sides might die. She turned her gaze back to Caden. "I have to stop this. No matter the cost." His jaw clenched. "I've done all I can to prepare our defenses, but Aldrich's numbers and alliances dwarf ours. If we lose the outer gate, the rest of Silverhaven will fall quickly." A pang of guilt knifed through Evelyn. She remembered the night Aldrich cast her aside, the heartbreak that led her to flee into Caden's domain. That heartbreak now fueled an entire war, Aldrich's pride wounded, his old illusions broken. If only she could have convinced him earlier that she was not a possession. Caden gently laid a hand on her shoulder. "Whatever happens, know that I stand by you. If you choose to end this conflict in a way that defies tradition, I will follow your lead." A tear escaped down Evelyn's cheek. She whispered, "Thank you. But you must brace yourself for what's coming, Caden. I can't promise the outcome will favor any alpha, including you." His lips curved into a sad, understanding smile. "True love isn't about claiming or caging. If you decide to walk a path away from me, I won't stop you." She closed her eyes, relief and sorrow mingling. In that moment, she understood how different Caden was from Aldrich. He embodied the choice the goddess had hinted at, freedom, not coercion. And yet, Evelyn sensed that even love offered freely might hold her back from the destiny she now realized was calling. She was not merely a Luna in need of a mate. She was something else, a force of change. At dawn, a crimson sun rose over the horizon, its light filtered through roiling clouds like bloodstains in the sky. A horn's echo blared from beyond the walls, Blackmoor's signal to attack. From the ramparts, Evelyn watched Aldrich surge to the forefront of his army, mounted on a powerful warhorse. Around him marched rows of grim-faced wolves with spears and swords raised, ready to lay down their lives at his word. Silverhaven's archers loosed a flurry of arrows, falling in a deadly rain on the attackers. But this time, Aldrich's forces advanced with siege equipment, heavy battering rams and wheeled towers, lurching forward with unstoppable momentum. The outer gate shuddered under the impact of the first ram strike. Caden's top lieutenants barked orders. Arrows and magical wards slowed the invaders, but did not halt them. The clash roared, metal on metal, snarls of wolves locked in combat. Blood slicked the stones. High overhead, crows circled, drawn by the carnage. Evelyn hurried down the stairs, heart hammering, until she reached the courtyard. There, she encountered Taryn, the aged seer who had guided her training. Taryn's mismatched eyes burned with urgency. "They've broken through the gate's first layer. Our wards weaken. It may only be minutes until they breach the city proper." Evelyn pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the swirl of her empathic powers. She glanced around at Silverhaven's defenders, many of them already injured or exhausted. If the front line fell, the slaughter would be unimaginable. She drew a trembling breath. I'll go to him. Taryn's brows arched. Aldrich? Child, he's beyond reasoning. Maybe not, Evelyn insisted, voice shaking but resolute. I saw a spark of doubt in him once. If I can face him, show him that I refuse to be claimed or manipulated, he might relent. And if not, her throat constricted, then I do what must be done. Taryn laid a gentle hand on Evelyn's arm, understanding flickering in her eyes. Celera be with you. With Taryn's help, Evelyn slipped through a secondary passage to the outer gate, just as Aldrich's warriors smashed it wide open. The splintered wood crashed inward, sending defenders reeling. Smoke and dust billowed, obscuring visibility. Wolves on both sides howled in the chaos. Blood soaked the stones where fresh bodies fell. Evelyn emerged from behind a collapsed barricade. A group of Blackmoor soldiers charged forward to strike her, but they halted at the sight of her face, confusion warring with loyalty. They recognized her as their old Luna, once beloved, now declared a traitor. Yet the raw power emanating from her stance compelled them to hesitate. She raised her voice, clear over the din, I seek Aldrich. Let me pass. Some faltered, others aimed trembling weapons, uncertain. Then, Beta Lucian appeared through the haze, shield battered and face smeared with grime. He froze at the sight of Evelyn, eyes wide with shock and guilt. Evelyn, he rasped. Tears stung her eyes. Lucian had been a friend once. Now he stood among those besieging her new home. Lucian, please, she said, voice thick. Let me speak to Aldrich. He cast an anguished glance around at the carnage. His loyalty to Aldrich warred visibly with shame. After a tense heartbeat, he stepped aside. He's just ahead. Evelyn nodded and slipped past, ignoring the renewed clash behind her. She felt the prickle of unsheathed blades, but also sensed the reticence in Blackmoor's wolves. Some recognized her, their old Luna, making them hesitate to strike. She pressed forward until at last she spotted Aldrich at the center of the breach, brandishing a longsword. His warhorse had been lost to the chaos, and he fought on foot, roaring commands to his men. Rubble and bodies littered the ground. The stink of blood thickened the air. Evelyn's heart pounded, but she forced herself forward. Aldrich, she cried out, voice raw. He whirled, sword raised, eyes burning with fury. Yet upon seeing her, a flicker of something else broke through his rage, pain, regret. Evelyn, he growled, voice straining at the edges. You dare step onto this field? You should have fled while you could. She advanced, refusing to cower. Too much blood has been spilled, Aldrich. End this madness now. His grip on the sword tightened, knuckles white. You turned your back on me, for Caden, for some twisted second bond. How dare you stand before me and order me to yield? She braced herself against the hatred and sorrow radiating from him. I made no oath to you once you cast me aside. I was never your possession. And this war solves nothing. All you do is kill wolves who once trusted me as their Luna, and who still follow you out of blind loyalty. He snarled, stepping closer. They follow me because I am Alpha. You were mine, Evelyn, my mate, chosen by the goddess. No second bond should exist. Bitterness stabbed her heart. Chosen by the goddess? I was a means to give you an heir, until you decided I wasn't good enough. Now you call me your mate again only because your pride is wounded. A flicker of shame crossed his face. I tried to fix my mistake. You would not return. Caden stole you. No, she snapped, tears burning hot. I left because you shattered our bond. Caden did not steal me. I chose to remain free of your tyranny. Something snapped in Aldrich's gaze, a swirl of heartbreak and rage. You belong with me, he snarled. But if you will not come willingly, then I'll kill every wolf that stands between us. He raised his sword, trembling with emotion. One last time, Evelyn, come. Surrender yourself, or I will carve my way to you. Her stomach lurched. The heartbreak in his voice felt like a twisted echo of the love they once shared. She inhaled, steeling her resolve. No, I will not let you, or anyone, claim me again. Lightning seemed to pulse under her skin. She felt the goddess's gift stirring, that raw empathic power fueling a deeper strength. She stepped forward, arms raised, ignoring the circle of battle around them. Aldrich, I reject your final claim. He roared, lunging, sword poised for a fatal strike. The world slowed for Evelyn as she tapped into the swirling tapestry of bonds. She saw the final thread tethering Aldrich to her, a broken, twisted cord of obsession born of a once sacred mate bond. With a cry of anguish, she seized that thread in the psychic realm and cut it. Pain exploded through her mind, echoing Aldrich's tortured scream. For an instant, she glimpsed the shape of his wolf spirit, howling in despair as the last remnants of their bond disintegrated. His sword clattered to the ground, and he collapsed to his knees, clutching his head in agony. A hush rippled across the battlefield as wolves on both sides felt the shockwave of Evelyn's power, the intangible quake that signaled a bond severed by the goddess's own chosen. Blackmoor warriors paused mid-attack, stunned. Silverhaven defenders stared in awe at Evelyn, luminous energy crackling around her body like pale moonlight. Aldrich trembled, tears carving lines through the dirt on his face. Evelyn, he rasped, voice ragged. What have you done? She stepped closer, breath hitching from the psychic strain. I ended what should have ended the moment you renounced me. It's over, Aldrich. Grief warped his features. He reached out as if to grasp her ankle, but she stepped back, firm. The swirl of empathy in her chest felt his heart break, yet she could no longer let it bind her. I'm sorry, she said softly, tears brimming. But love can't exist where one seeks possession. Aldrich bowed his head, a sob tearing from his throat. In that moment, the battle around them seemed suspended. Wolves from both armies watched the fallen alpha, undone by the final severing of his old mate bond. A wave of shame coursed through his posture, a realization too late. His love was never about devotion, only control. While Aldrich knelt in defeat, Caden broke through the throng of warriors, panting from exertion. Blood stained one sleeve, but he remained upright. He saw Aldrich's broken form, felt the electric hush in the air, and turned questioning eyes to Evelyn. She approached him, chest tight. Caden, thank you for everything. For showing me that love could be offered freely. But now I must stand alone. His eyes registered deep hurt, though he masked it with acceptance. I understand, he murmured hoarsely. You've grown beyond what any pack can contain, haven't you? She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I can't be a Luna to any alpha, not you, not Aldrich. My path lies in forging a new life, where our kind isn't bound by forced bonds or fated illusions. Where we choose who we love and how. A trembling sigh escaped his lips. Though heartbreak flickered in his gaze, he managed a sad smile. Then go. I won't stand in your way. Whatever you build, you have my support, even if it's from afar. Emotion surged, and she hugged him briefly, letting tears spill. It was a moment of gratitude and farewell. His arms wrapped around her gently, no trace of possession or demand. She felt his own bond's connection in the psychic realm, a silver thread that glimmered with sincerity. With a whispered apology, she severed that bond too, removing the forced pull of fate between them. The cut was kinder, free of bitterness. Still, she felt the pang of his heartbreak and her own sorrow as the final tie dissolved. He inhaled sharply, staggered by the psychic jolt, then drew back. A tear glistened on his cheek, but he bowed his head in reverence. Goodbye, Evelyn. Days later, the conflict ended without further bloodshed. Aldrich's forces, demoralized by his collapse and the severing of the old mate bond, retreated from Silverhaven's walls. Many recognized the futility of fighting for a cause fueled by an alpha's wounded pride. Some pack leaders openly questioned Aldrich's judgment, disillusioned by how his obsession nearly cost them all. Within Blackmoor, the elders, once staunchly behind Aldrich, began to lose faith. Whispers spread that he no longer carried the rightful blessings of the moon goddess. Wolves looked upon him with pity or scorn, his reign weakened by the knowledge that he had cast aside his mate and then waged a disastrous war to reclaim her. Caden, meanwhile, returned to Silver Haven with quieter leadership. Though sadness lingered in him, he became a true alpha by letting go rather than controlling, demonstrating a respect for free will that won him admiration among his people. He commanded alliances based on mutual respect, and peace gradually returned to the region. As for Evelyn, she did not claim Aldrich's territory nor remain in Silver Haven under Caden's rule. Instead, she traveled across the werewolf lands, forging bonds of her own making. She carried a new mantle, Alpha Queen, a leader not bound by an alpha mate, but recognized by many packs for her role in reshaping the laws of their kind. The old system, which declared mate bonds unbreakable and fated, began to erode under her influence. More wolves embraced the idea that love was a choice, that no one should be enslaved by a bond that only brought misery or manipulation. Step by step, with courage and empathy, Evelyn helped rewrite the laws of werewolf society. Forced claiming was outlawed, ensuring no wolf could be taken as a mate without free consent. Second chance bonds became recognized not as abominations, but as symbols of hope, proof that wolves could survive heartbreak and find renewed love if they wished. Pack leadership no longer hinged on producing heirs through a Luna, but rather on merit and the well-being of the wolves. In time, the smaller packs rallied to Evelyn's ideals, calling her the Alpha Queen. She built a modest seat of power in a once-forgotten fortress nestled between Blackmoor and Silver Haven, bridging the two realms. From there, she presided not as a tyrant, but as a mediator, promoting unity and free will among all wolves. Years passed. The echo of war receded, replaced by cautious alliances and the slow healing of old wounds. Blackmoor, once the greatest stronghold, struggled under Aldrich's weakened rule. Many of his old supporters drifted away, disenchanted by the tragedy he had nearly unleashed. Though he remained alpha, his reign was haunted by regret, a daily reminder that his love for Evelyn had been corrupted by pride and fear. In Silver Haven, Caden led his pack into an era of prosperity. His open-minded approach, tempered by heartbreak, enabled new forms of cooperation with neighboring packs. Though a lingering sadness dwelled in his heart, he found solace in seeing Evelyn's vision spread. He realized that letting her go had indeed been the right path, an act of love free from selfishness. And Evelyn? She lived each day in her new domain, forging a legacy that no Luna in memory had achieved, rulership unfettered by subservience to any mate. Wolves from all corners journeyed to her court, seeking guidance or freedom from oppressive bonds. She intervened carefully, using her empathic powers to help couples mend broken love or peacefully dissolve toxic bonds, always preserving free will above all else. No one called her a goddess or revered her as infallible. She stood as a beacon of choice, a living testament to the idea that no fate is unalterable if one has the courage to break it. And though she sometimes felt the lonely ache of forging her destiny alone, she found comfort in the countless wolves who blossomed under the reforms she championed. One evening, as twilight settled over her fortress, Evelyn wandered the ramparts alone. The wind carried the scent of pine and distant hearth fires. She gazed upon the lands stretching in every direction, remembering how once she stood on a parapet in Blackmoor, thinking she had no freedom at all. How far she had come. A new generation of wolves grew up knowing that mate bonds were precious gifts, yet never a prison. They spoke of her as the Alpha Queen who rewrote tradition, who embraced her power not to dominate, but to free wolves from the chains of blind destiny. And so, a quiet sense of peace settled over her spirit. She had broken from both Aldrich and Caden, forging a path that was truly her own. Atop that wall, under a sky awash with moonlight, Evelyn closed her eyes and whispered a silent thanks to the moon goddess. For, in the end, the goddess's greatest gift had not been a second bond or unstoppable power, but the freedom to choose. Evelyn had chosen compassion over violence, autonomy over bondage, and the well-being of all wolves over any personal desire. Thus ended the old ways, overshadowed by a new era of werewolves who believed in love tempered by consent and leadership guided by empathy. Evelyn's vow echoed throughout the land, etched into lore and legend. No wolf shall be forced to remain in a bond against their will, and no Luna shall be subservient to any alpha's whim. It was a promise that would shape the future of their kind for generations to come. Far away in Blackmoor, Aldrich stared out from his once great castle, shoulders heavy with regret. And in Silverhaven, Caden walked through moonlit halls, proud of a kingdom thriving in peace. Yet neither possessed the one who had rewritten destiny. Evelyn remained somewhere between them, forging a new way forward, proving once and for all that true strength lay not in fate or force, but in the unwavering choice to stand free and guide others toward that same freedom.